team with the Seahawks with less than 4 minutes to go on the pick. They arrived here. This is an Alaska Airlines special, this pick. It began with Oakland, and they made a trade with Houston to get up into the number 9 spot to pick Ricky Dudley. And as a result, the Oilers got this pick in addition to a second and a fourth. Then the Seahawks went down to this pick 17, allowing Houston to go up to 14 to pick Eddie George. So the Seahawks, for allowing Houston to move up, pick up defensive tackle Glenn Montgomery. So now the question is, could the Seahawks double down again? If the three names I have are correct, they could go a couple more spots down, or they could just get the pick and get it over with. Let's go up to our Bristol headquarters with Chris Fowler and Mike Lombardi. Guys?
Yeah, it's the pick from the team that used to be in L.A., went to Oakland, traded to Houston, to Seattle, which may be going back to L.A. The guy that used to be in Cleveland's war room. What's going on right now? Pick number 17, the middle of the first round. What are you thinking? If you're not in the first round, do you try to trade up, or what if you have one of these picks?
Well, I think the two teams that don't have first-round picks are looking now that they potentially can get to the first round, San Diego and San Francisco, as we start to get in the bottom half of the first. Defensive linemen are obviously a premium, so they're going to go right now. Tony Brackens may be the only one with great pass-rushing skills that you could potentially get at this slot.
Well, watching Tony Brackens play in college at Texas, he was truly one of the difference makers among the defensive players in college football. Texas's defense without Tony Brackens in there was completely different. The stats were night and day when Brackens came back from his injuries and was able to play. I
think Tony's a fine player, and I think in terms of draft management, you've got to try to find yourself a defensive lineman, and this is the area where they're all going to be gone pretty soon.
All right, certainly a commodity. You've seen the run on defensive linemen start. Let's see if it'll continue. Let's go back to Chris in New York.
All right, guys, thank you. I think the fact that well, it's interesting, among those Mike Lombardi mentioned them, San Francisco and San Diego. Question is, with them midway through the second round, did they have enough juice to get all the way up here to spot number 17? I don't know. I do know, and when we get to San Diego, we'll talk about the Bolts, that they have totally changed their whole wide receiver look. A lot of their veterans are, they've totally changed the look of the whole ball club. But I think it's, right now, I don't know that San Diego can move up, although there's a long time history between Mike Allman, who does such a great job with the Seattle Seahawks drafting and scouting, and Bobby Beathard. The two are together for years and years at Washington, Joe, and certainly Mike Allman was one of the first people that you met when you went to Washington,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah. Mike and I really literally almost ran into each other in the beginning, but they always go back. It's funny. You build a relationship in this business, and you deal with the people that you know. They make trades. Yeah, exactly. You trust them. They trust you. I tell you, another team that doesn't have a first-round pick, or a second, really, is Atlanta. They gave that up for Patrick Bates from Oakland, but they would like to get up somewhere here to try and help their ball club. So we've got some teams with a couple of picks in the first. We've got some teams that don't have any. I still think there's a lot of dealing ahead in this draft in the first round.
Well, as we suggested, with now the Seattle taking 14 minutes again, I think they're going to double down again. Let's go up to the commissioner and see what the Seahawks have done. It's got to be a trade card when it takes longer. You see, well, let's see. That's, what is that, a second and a fourth? And how do you pronounce that
He's
name?
trying to figure out who's going where.
Let's see. We got Val in the picture there. I can't see. Is that Val Pinchback? Well, this could be a confusing trade. We got three: Reggie Roberts, Jim Stegall. We got them all involved now.
The Seattle Seahawks, which have been on the board with the 17th pick, have concluded a trade with the Detroit Lions. Detroit moves into the 17th choice in the first round. With that pick, Detroit is selecting Reggie Brown, linebacker, Texas A&M. And Seattle obtains Detroit's picks, in the first round, 21st position, third round, the 91st position in this draft.
The Seattle Seahawks have done some good poker playing. If Montgomery can help them at all at defensive tackle, and I'll tell you you saw that look on Jimmy Johnson's face when Mobley went to Denver.
Yeah, well, it just got sadder.
Yeah, this is the other real speed linebacker that would fit, I think, that Jimmy had his eye on. And so now Detroit gets some speed at the linebacker position.
When you look at Reggie Brown, what he did early in his career wasn't that much, wasn't very impressive. But when he came on as a junior, he started to get a lot of attention. And this past year, he really made his presence felt. Then he had his workout, which was incredible. Ran tremendous 40 times in the 4.48 range, showed great quickness and good strength. And I think when you looked at the computer numbers of Reggie Brown, then you threw in the productivity from this year. Until this season, like I said, he was basically a workout warrior, an underachiever. People questioned his instincts. But this year, they freed him up to get after to the quarterback more, play in coverage, become almost like a Kevin Hardy without those great instincts. And that's what has allowed Reggie Brown in a very, very poor linebacking crop to force Detroit, after Mobley had been taken, to move up to get Reggie Brown.
Well, I think you also have to take into consideration they lost Chris Spielman. I mean, you lose Chris Spielman, you lose somebody. There's no doubt that they had to improve speed in that area. Again, you're talking about a division that puts the ball in the air, and you need people back in secondary coverage underneath with linebackers. I think it's another good choice and a good trade for both teams.
Well, let's get the opinion of Gary Danielson, Joe. He's out at Arizona, but Detroit making a move, and they have 2 first-round picks, so they could play a little bit, and that's what they did.
Yeah, Chris, that's exactly what they did. I heard Joe speculating they signed Michael Brooks to replace Chris Spielman. I think the pick of Reggie Brown, a lot of really wheeling and dealing by the Lions here. They fear Jimmy Johnson picking right in front of them might take Brown, who they tagged as the speed linebacker they needed. And with the money they can sign with Brown, Mike Johnson might be in a little bit of trouble, a high-paid outside linebacker. They can sign Brown, take a little money away from Mike Johnson, and use it to pay Kevin Glover, who was their franchise player. They retracted that franchise designation. They can save some money, so the Lions feel like they can get 2 players with this pick, an outside linebacker and Reggie Brown, and can sign their center, Glover, which they desperately need. They lost 4 offensive linemen in the offseason, Lomas, Brown, both guards, and so with being able to free up some cap money, I think you can really see why this trade made sense for the Lions. Let's further go down now to Chris Mortensen down in Miami.
Well, I know that the Lions were looking for speed and defense, and so is the Miami Dolphins. Jimmy Johnson did not show the disappointment, however, as he showed when John Mobley was taken. So I think he kind of anticipated that somebody was going to jump up there, because the competition for those linebackers was pretty competitive at this point. And then you see Jimmy here on the phone. He's talking. St. Louis is on the board. One of the players St. Louis has in mind is Baylor defensive tackle Darrell Gardner, and as well as a wide receiver. So I'm sure Jimmy's wondering what St. Louis is up to. If for some reason all their players are gone, you can look for Jimmy to move out of there. Let's go to Hank Goldberg in St. Louis.
Yes, the baby food guy, Mort. And actually, Jason Dunn was a possibility, the tight end, but when you said wide receiver, my guess is you're right on the money from what I'm told. Eddie Kennison is high on the list here, the wide receiver from LSU, so I would project Kennison in this spot.
All right, Hank, we'll check you out and see if we can mark it down and file it away. So the Seahawks have doubled down twice. St. Louis is on the board with their second first-round selection. We'll be back at the theater at Madison Square Garden, where there's been some good theater. We now have St. Louis with the number 18 pick. The Rams are up with the second pick in the first round. They picked Lawrence Phillips earlier. A little note, it's the first time with St. Louis up, it makes us think of it. It's the first time since 1982 that we've had draft picks from St. Louis, Baltimore, and Oakland. Just file it away. St. Louis knows where they're going. The pick is up to the commissioner. And do you think it's wide receiver? You think they get Marvin Harrison, guys?
I think it's wide receiver or possibly Kennison. I think it's wide
Kennison,
receiver.
Dunn.
Yeah. 2 great football players.
With the 18th choice in the first round, the St. Louis Rams select Eddie Kennison, wide receiver from Louisiana State University.
Certainly has some speed.
Are now on the clock with a pick obtained earlier from Atlanta.
Certainly has some speed
and really
can return. That's a big plus for Kennison.
Yeah, and he really came out of school a little bit early, only because I don't think Jerry DiNardo was going to allow him to go on and participate in track during the spring. I think there was a little philosophical difference between the head coach and him, so he said, fine, if I can't do the things I did, then I'm going to come out of school. I think I can be a first-round pick. He can, and you brought it up, Chris. This kid is a heck of a return man. This guy, Mel, can run.
He can, Joe, but I guess if I'm going to bash somebody, it's going to be St. Louis this year. I don't like Steve Walsh at quarterback. I don't like Lawrence Phillips at running back, and I don't like this pick over Marvin Harrison. You look at a great player like Harrison. He's also a great return man, and they go with Eddie Kennison, who's a decent player. But to me, somebody's going to get a great player in Marvin Harrison that's still on the board. It may be Indianapolis, but this is a decent football player. There's no question he can return. You look at his receptions, 98 in his career, and he came out early as a junior. My attitude, though, is when you're grading out of Marvin Harrison and Eddie Kennison, I think there's a big difference in ability.
Well, let's go to someone who knows a little bit how to grade wide receivers, and that's our Sterling Sharp. We heard Sterling talk about Marvin Harrison earlier. Sterling, haven't heard you talk about Kennison. Compare, contrast these two players. Do you like them both?
Chris, I really do, and I had Kennison rated as my number 3 guy up with Marvin Harrison and then Keyshawn Johnson. Eddie Kennison is a guy with a lot of ability with a lot more weight. And as we take a look at 191 pounds, he can do the underneath work for Isaac Bruce. I mean, he's a guy who wants the football in every type situation. And yeah, they say he may not be a very good practice player, but I'm going to tell you, when the lights go on Sunday, which is when you really need him and you really want him to light it up, Eddie Kennison is a very, very dangerous young man. And as a return man, he's got the weight that he can return both punts and kickoffs. He can take the NFL pounding. He can go inside, play like a big Herman Moore, Jerry Rice type guy. He's a guy I really like, though. I think the thing is you probably can't trust his ability because he hadn't had a lot of work at playing wide receiver like Joe mentioned because he was trying to run track during the spring. And I think this is a good pick. I still love Marvin Harrison. I can't believe he slid this far down. I think maybe Philadelphia will look at him as a return man and take him right now because they need a quality wide receiver. Back to you, Chris.
Well, I tell you what, I think neither the Colts nor the Dolphins can believe that Marvin Harrison has slipped this far either. He's not going to slip very much farther. A couple comments on Kennison as we go to break. One of the insiders, one of the bird dogs out there told me this week that of all the wide receivers, or at least the top ones, he's the best blocker. He's the best blocker of the group. There was some question as to how well he was liked by his LSU teammates, but the same bird dog told me, you know, sometimes a horse needs the right jockey. Not to say anything wrong with the situation at LSU, but it's not as if we're worried about will he fit in. Sometimes it's just the wrong guy riding the wrong horse. And I think with the right jockey, Eddie Kennison could be a big-time player. Lewis is hoping. Indianapolis and Miami. We go to the AFC East when we return.
Reinhold Bertleff had a key role in the building of Porsche's 911 Carrera. Did he design the engine? The radical suspension? No. Instead, Reinhold and his co-workers have perhaps the best job in the world. They test drive every 911 on the Autobahn. If Reinhold likes your car, we're pretty sure you'll like your car.
Let's see. Now available. New communications company with some experience. Invented dial tone, also phone, transistor, laser, cellular. Has won awards, Nobel, etc. Formerly part of AT&T, now Lucent Technologies. We make the things that make communications work.
Yeah, we've been to playoff games together. It's nerve-wracking.
Is it different from the regular season?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much more at stake. And every game, you just sweat every game. I can never watch.
It can be really nerve-wracking.
Thousands of screaming fans. It's like a scary movie.
He thinks it's really easy for us to watch, and he doesn't understand why anyone in the family has difficulty watching. No, he just said, well, you're just watching a game. You don't understand. We have to live with him.
We're back at the NFL draft. The Indianapolis Colts, team that was one play away from getting to the Super Bowl. They're on the clock. They got about 10 minutes to go before we bat it around here at draft headquarters with Joe and Mel, because Indianapolis, Miami, AFC East. Here comes a home run type guy for Harrison, we think. Let's go to St. Louis, where our Hank Goldberg is with Rich Brooks, who just selected Eddie Kennison. Hank?
Thanks, Boomer. And Coach, Eddie Kennison, your second pick. Lawrence Phillips, your first pick. And Phillips, of course, with all the things that have been said about him, he's got to be the most scrutinized player in the history of the draft. At what point were you comfortable with what you saw in him?
Well, we were comfortable after we brought him in here for a visit and sat down and talked to him at length about his off-the-field problem. We also, John Becker on my staff had recruited him out of high school. We never got him to visit Oregon, but we tried hard. We know a lot about this young man, and we're convinced that he's going to do the things necessary to address that and make sure that that was an incident that will not be repeated. He's remorseful. We understand the seriousness of that type of act, and we will in no way think that that's something that we would condone in any way, shape, or form. But I'm convinced that this is going to be behind him. He's going through anger treatment, and he's committed to doing the right thing.
Will he be asked or contractually committed to doing things in the community? Will that be something that the team would want him to do?
Well, I think that there certainly will be some safeguards in the contract, as well as some stipulations to make sure that he has more than just a casual interest in doing the right thing.
Your owner, Georgia Frontier, being a woman, did she have a role in this selection? Was this something that you talked about with her?
Well, this is certainly something that we would not have done if Georgia wasn't comfortable with it. Now, I'm not saying she's standing on the table saying it was the greatest thing in the world, but we feel that he slipped to us because of that problem, and much like, unfortunately, Warren Sapp's situation a year ago because of an off-the-field problem, at some point the value when you feel good about a person has to take precedence over what the position is in the draft.
Did you feel he was the best player in the draft?
We had him #1 on our board unquestionably.
Eddie Kennison, with your second pick, Mel Kiper just said he would have gone for Harrison. He said he's not sure he would have gone for Phillips. What's your reaction to that?
Well, you know, Mel's got an opinion, obviously. We don't share that opinion. We had Kennison on our board as the #1 receiver for us. We think he is an underutilized player at LSU with big-time breakaway ability as a receiver, big-time breakaway ability as a punt returner and a kickoff returner, a more physical football player, over 190 pounds, nearly 6 feet than Glenn or Harrison.
What can we expect the rest of the draft?
I think you'll see us continue to bring an explosive situation to this team where we can improve our offense a little bit. I think we made some significant moves in the offseason and free agency to strengthen the defense, and I think we've made 2 great acquisitions here to get to help the offense.
Okay, Coach, thanks. Rich Brooks joining us here in St. Louis. Let's send it back to Chris Berman in New York.
All right, Hank and Coach Brooks, thank you very much. And aside, as we go to Mel's board, personally, I think Rich Brooks is a perfect type coach for Lawrence Phillips and an Eddie Kennison. Not that they're problem people necessarily. I just think that the match is right. And those young men don't know Rich Brooks right now. Maybe they get to know him a little bit here in the offseason. But Kennison and Phillips will like Rich Brooks' style. He understands college players. He understands the attitude. He's been there a long time. He can be a fatherly figure, very warm. I think it's a good mix for these 2 young men. Now let's go to your board now, and your hole is Marvin Harrison. What's happening here?
There's no question, Chris. I think when you look back, Andre Rison had dropped in that 22 area when he came out of Michigan State, and he had, of course, a great career so far. I think when you look at Marvin Harrison and you see him there as the 8th best player, and we're at pick 19, he's the value choice now. He also has the return skills. Indianapolis needs a speed receiver. I think he'd be ideal for that offense. And, of course, the rest of the players have gone off the board. When we drop it on down a little bit, you'll see there are still some talent available for these teams picking in the late first round. But Marvin Harrison is the key ingredient, the key football player that has dropped.
Indianapolis Colts, let's look at their receiving chart, Joe. And, of course, they got a great year out of their young tight end last year, Dilger, but they have some spots where they could fill.
Well, they also got a great year out of Marshall Faulk. He's their #1 receiver. Dawkins has not really blossomed to be the receiver they'd hoped they wanted, and Dilger, the tight end, did, as you mentioned, did an excellent job. 56 out of Marshall. Sean Dawkins, only 52 catches, and Dilger 42. I think they need another complimentary wide receiver, and I think they'll go with Sean Dawkins, see what he can do this year, and if he can't, they may find somebody else to feature it. Coaches aren't willing to wait a long time anymore. They don't have to wait. Players don't hang around. They go take big money. Coaches want production right now. I think they have a chance to get a heck of a football player right here at the wide receiver position. If it isn't Harrison, it could be Moulds. I mean, they've got a choice. Well, those 2 guys could be there.
And here again, you said Dungy defense. You had Vince Tobin defense, right. Lindy and Fonte offense.
Absolutely. I think you have to look at the personality of the coach. Quite often, the personality of the coach will dictate the area that he wants to strengthen his football team, one where he can have a personal hand in the development of the young man. I think Lindy and Fonte is a great teacher and can develop wide receivers very well. Kenny Sterling.
4.5 minutes to go with Indianapolis on the clock. Then Jimmy Johnson of Miami next. Seattle after that. We'll be back to New York. Indianapolis Colts are on the clock with under 3 minutes to go. The pick is in. The heat is on. Here it comes.
With the 19th choice in the first round, the Indianapolis Colts select Marvin Harrison, Wide receiver from Syracuse.
Fast.
Miami Dolphins are now on the clock.
Fast, fast, and fast. And you know, if he sat there for Miami, I got to think Jimmy was at least looking at him. So Miami is kind of doing some gyrations. But let's go, Sterling Sharp. This is your man, Marvin Harrison. He's going to Lindy Infante, who was your coach when you broke in. Add the two up for us.
Well, not only that, Chris, they got Buddy Geist, who was my receivers coach there as well. And the one thing Lindy will do is put this young man in a position to where he'll do exactly what he did with the Syracuse Orangemen, and that's make big plays. I mean, in this offense, you're going to get a chance to see what this guy can do. Most of the passes you'll get a chance to see is like this, a 7 route. In Lindy's offense, it'll be a bench route. He enjoys catching the ball in his hands all over the football field, not only in traffic. He's got great change of speed, and I think he's the best body control guy, technique guy, and transition route runner in the draft. And I mean, I've been harping on Marvin Harrison all day, and like Andre Rison a few years ago, this is the steal of the first round so far, because not only do you get a guy with speed, you get a guy with aggressiveness to the football, you get a guy with great vision before the catch. He sees where he can play with his back to the defense. I think this is a great pick for Lindy, and I think this guy's going to jump up and show you that he's a great receiver. He's going to be a great receiver. Chris, back to you.
Well, Sterling, another bird dog, told me that he's kind of like a Lexus in this draft. You don't think the car is going that fast when you watch him, but he just flies down the field. He runs the patterns, as you say, and he's certainly going to a passing offense with Lindy Infante. So the Miami Dolphins are on the clock as a Super Bowl coach replaces a legend in Miami. The War Room, as the Dolphins ponder their first pick in the Jimmy Johnson era. Except that's Dallas's board. Okay, we'll be back. Some word that Dallas and Miami, strangers of bedfellows come draft time, might be working a trade involving Darren Smith. Chris Morton said at Miami Dolphin headquarters, if you saw our cut-ins last night, we spoke about that, Morton. I guess that hasn't come to fruition, but possibly could that happen right now with Miami on the clock? Let's go to Morton.
Boomer, I don't think so. I think that when Reggie Brown and John Mobley went off the board, the linebackers, that killed any chance of a trade with the Cowboys, because that's who the Cowboys were looking for. And quite frankly, Jimmy Johnson had an interest in both those linebackers as well. Now, at the end of the day yesterday, Jimmy Johnson had a healthy debate with his staff over Daryl Gardner, the Baylor defensive lineman, 6'6", 320 pounds, a guy who at the Senior Bowl had great week of practices, then was very quiet in the game, which is about way his career went at Baylor. In other words, Gardner is a player who needs motivation. Jimmy Johnson has a lot of motivational skills, so that could be a match in case nobody calls to trade up at this point. Now, earlier this morning, Jimmy called his staff into the draft room. He doesn't basically allow his coaches in the war room, so he's telling his coaches, hey, I'm not saying you can't come in here. If you do, let's have some order. If you got any information, give it to Kevin O'Neill, our trainer, who's in the blue shirt there, and then he toasts everybody and says, let's have a great day. Jimmy clearly looking forward to this day. He needs some players, and Daryl Gardner might be one of them. Chris, back to you.
All right, Mort, thank you very much. Jimmy Johnson, certainly what he drafted from a Dallas Cowboy team when he and Jerry Jones came in together, and the two of them combining on a team that once went 1-15. These are players drafted in the Johnson and Jones era. Troy Aikman, Darrell Johnston, Mark Stepnoski, Emmitt Smith, Alvin Harper, Eric Williams, Kevin Williams. Most of those names have been to Pro Bowls. On defense, drafted in the same era. Tolbert and Larry Brown, the MVP of last year's Super Bowl, and Dixon Edwards, Leon Lett, just a real nice player. Russell Maryland, Robert Jones, Kevin Smith, Darren Woodson, Brock Marion, Darren Smith, Kevin Smith, Darren Woodson, all those guys. And the common trait with most of them, speed. Able to get to the football, able to play a scheme that's not by NFL standards on either side of the ball that difficult, but when you get there faster than anyone else, and you're younger and you're hungrier and you combine it all together, that's why the Dallas Cowboys had the nucleus to win 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls. We asked around the league the difference between Jimmy Johnson coaching in Miami versus that in Dallas. We sampled some opinion.
I think in Dallas, I think he had exactly his type of team. He had some young players. He had a team that had not really won, and they were ready to listen to him and take exactly what he said to heart, and he could basically structure the team the way he wanted to.
It's the fact that Jimmy inherited a mature team that was fighting for a Super Bowl every year. And consequently, it's much more difficult to take that team from the top of the middle, where it is, to the top in this system. I think it's much more difficult to do that than it was in years past.
Well, I joked with him at Indianapolis. He said, Carl, when I left, we didn't have this thing called a cap. And I know right now he's felt like he's been stuck because he hasn't been able to move, and he's lost a couple of good players because of their cap situation.
Well, I really don't know that there are major differences when you evaluate talent, whether it be free agents or players coming into the draft. You still have to evaluate players. You still have to win with talent. And then once you get the talent to the franchise, they have to play at a maximum level. And so you still have to coach them. You still have to motivate them. So I don't know that there are drastic differences now than what it was a few years ago.
Well, it may be different, but the War Room on draft day is a very, very special place. And these are the scenes in both Dallas and in Miami, with Miami on the clock and the Cowboys, of course, having won the Super Bowl, are number 30. Jerry reclining, looking at Jimmy, and Jimmy's, I don't know, they got some decisions to make here right now with about 6:40 left on the clock with Miami. Now, of course, when taking over the Miami Dolphins, Joe, and you heard Carl Peterson refer to it, 3 big salaried defensive players left. And the one I think he didn't want to lose was Troy Vincent to Philadelphia. The other two, he kind of he liked the guys, but he realized that under the cap they had to go.
I think Marco Coleman, I think Brian Cox, I think he could live without him, but Troy Vincent was a guy, he's a very unique covered corner. 5 interceptions last year. He has the physical skills to play. He's going to be a big plus in Philadelphia. He has got a physical nature about what he can do, and it'll help tremendously for him. I think Jimmy, first of all, I like Jimmy's new hairdo. It's got a little bit of a wave in it, and it's a new look for him for a new football team. I think that he is going to try and go after speed. This has been his history. We've talked about it. That's the nature. First guy to come to my mind would be Ray Lewis. The second alternative would be Lewis will be there. I can trade down. Jimmy loves to get draft picks. I don't think he's quite got a handle exactly yet on this thing called the salary cap. I think you have to go through it. You have to experience it. Bob Eccles, who's a veteran, is in the organization as well, understands it. But it's going to be very difficult for him. See, Jimmy Johnson coached through intimidation. Players were scared to death of him. He can't scare anybody anymore, because if he signs somebody to a big dollar, he can't get rid of them. And that's one of the problems this salary cap has created, not only for Jimmy, but for a lot of coaches around the league. They're stuck with people that they may not want to keep for the better of their football team, simply because they can't afford to get rid of them.
Mel, let me ask you, and Joe mentioned Ray Lewis, inside linebacker of Miami, so he would be playing at home. Is that a good fit, or are there another player or two at this point with some speed that Jimmy might be looking at right now farther down your board?
I really don't. I think Jimmy's in a real dilemma here. When you look at Ray Lewis, I think he's got plenty of speed. I know there's been speculation that he doesn't. He ran 4.64 on grass during an individual workout. He's 235 pounds. He's a great football player. He averaged maybe 17 to 20 tackles per game at Miami. I just don't see Darrell Gardner being a good fit with Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson wants guys who go out there and produce and are impact players and make big plays. And Darrell Gardner did not do that on a consistent basis at Baylor. I just don't see that being a great fit.
Well, the other thing I think that we have to consider is look where Ray Lewis comes from. Butch Davis is now the coach at the University of Miami. Butch Davis was Jimmy's defensive coach. This is a natural fit as far as getting a player who understands a system, so you don't have to spend a lot of time teaching a young man how to play the game. He comes from a coach who was in the professional level. I'm sure he sat down with him, explained to him what Jimmy's all about from a personality standpoint, and if the pick is made, then it is a good natural fit.
Well, there's about 4 minutes left to go on the clock as the Miami Dolphins look like they will burn up all 15 minutes. First-round picks are 15 minutes. Second-round picks are 10. Round 3 through 7 are 5 minutes if you're anticipating, as we are. When we return, the Dolphin selection. Stay with us as our draft coverage continues from New York and points beyond. And the Jimmy Johnson's team, we know that they're going to be very good. We know they're going to be different and good in a hurry.
Yep.
But there is some pressing. You know, Dan Marino doesn't have forever.
Right.
So do you get someone that might help you this year, or someone 2 to 3 years down the line, because he's building for a long run there? But another dilemma, isn't he?
He's in a little bit of a dilemma there, but I don't think so, Chris. I think he builds right now. Dan Marino's on a time schedule. He's probably going to sign a new contract anywhere between 3 and 4 years as an extension. And Danny, if anybody's worth $6 million, Dan Marino is worth that per year to a ball club. So they're going to invest the money in keeping Dan around. They've got a good offensive line. They've got decent wide receivers. The area that they have to focus on is on the defensive side of the ball. That has got to be Jimmy's biggest concern, and it's got to be taken care of right now.
Well, the pick is in. We head up to the point. Here's the defensive side of the ball, Joe. And as far as the sack, the guys who are left with sacks, not a lot of them. Right, Trace Armstrong, all right. Cross has certainly had better years. Bowens is a great run stopper in the middle, but they need somebody to pressure the quarterback. Here's the pick. Let's see if they got one. Confusing here?
I think it's a trade. Anytime you take that long to explain, it's a little bit of a deal.
With the 20th choice in the first round, the Miami Dolphins select Darryl Gardner, defensive tackle from Baylor.
Now this, I think, is interesting. I wouldn't have necessarily added 1 + 1 is 2, but as far as ability, Mel, Darryl Gardner's motor is running. He's very good, and it certainly addresses what we just put up there about the sack.
Defense.
I think physical ability, Chris, of Darryl Gardner is tremendous. You look at him, 6'6½", 320 pounds, runs a 4.9. Did 30 reps at 225. You see him in a one-on-one workout. This is where he really gets the attention of a defensive line coach. You watch him in a game, and we're going to see highlights here of some of the plays he made. Unfortunately, you didn't see this kind of ability play in and play out, down in and down out, even in the Southwest Conference, where this guy should have been dominating every game. And there were games where he was very average. And I think when you look at Darryl Gardner, what you're going to have to do with him is immediately get him into a mode where he's attacking the line of scrimmage on a regular basis. I know Jimmy, historically with the Cowboys, has always wanted guys at the college level that made big plays, that were playmakers. And unfortunately, Darryl Gardner was not that way at Baylor. He's either going to make Jimmy Johnson's draft or he's going to be a huge, huge bust.
When he makes the plays, Joe, 29% of his career tackles behind the line of scrimmage or quarterback sack. So there's a guy, when he makes the plays, another bird dog told me, has skills like Chester McLaughlin.
Absolutely. I think Chester McLaughlin's name has come up when you talk about Gardner, but Jimmy Johnson will get this young man to play at the level that he should have played at Baylor. There's no doubt in my mind that one of the great assets that Jimmy has is he does have the ability to motivate. I said before, he's lost the ability to intimidate, I think, because of the cap, and he's going to have to see how that does. But he will definitely get this young man motivated. It gives him some depth on that defensive line as well. And the big thing you got to look at in this division is who can put pressure on the passers. Bledsoe's not going to run away from too many people. You know Neil O'Donnell's not going to go very far. So there's a situation where now you need that big push up the middle. That makes an awful lot of sense to me as far as the pick goes.
Good point, Joe. Let's go to our man who's close to the scene of collegiate football in Texas, Craig James, and your thoughts on Darryl Gardner. I wouldn't have added up, really, Jimmy Johnson and Darryl Gardner, although maybe you've seen something in Gardner that would say it's a perfect fit. What do you think, Craig?
Well, I'll tell you why it's a perfect fit. It's a perfect fit because Jimmy Johnson doesn't care what people like you and I say about him. He's going to take a player that he believes has a lot of talent that he has a chance to groom and work with. Look back to Leon Lett. Folks thought he was crazy. Who's Leon Lett? Leon Lett is not Mr. Snowman. He's an all-pro football player now. Darryl Gardner has the physical skills to be an excellent player in the NFL. Jimmy Johnson will give him the chance mentally to excel and get to that next level, just like he did Leon Lett. So I think it's a great choice, and Darryl Gardner's a lucky man, Chris.
Well, you think of the mix in the middle now. You have the Bowens, the big kid, the run stopper, and if Gardner can fire off the ball, you have two different sort of players playing over the center and guard, and that can cause some confusion. To undo the confusion, let's go down to Miami and join Chris Mortensen. Mort?
Well, Chris, as I mentioned earlier, that Darryl Gardner was the last player that yesterday before they left the office, and they had determined that if he was there, if they had to make the pick, he was going to be the guy. But let's face it, Jimmy Johnson believes highly in his own motivational skills. The Miami Dolphins are a team that needs motivating. Darryl Gardner is a player that needs motivating. Jimmy Johnson clearly betting on himself in this situation. Now, a little bit before that pick, he gathered his coaching staff again, assembled them in the room, and as he waited for some phone calls to come in, and those calls didn't come in, he made the pick, shook his hand, said, this is our first draft pick. Let's get this guy ready to play. And so I clearly think that Jimmy believes Darryl Gardner will be an impact player because he and defensive line coach Kerry Goday will push all the right buttons. Let's go to Chris Myers in Dallas.
All right, thanks, Chris. Here in Dallas, the scouts, they have a term when they review players, boom or bust. They'll label them if you have to go one way or the other. And Gardner, by many people's accounts, was a bust. He was considered an underachiever, an inconsistent player, better workout guy than he was a player. Both Dave Shula, the Bengals, referred to him that way. The New Orleans Saints, they said they wouldn't have been surprised if Gardner had dropped out of the first round, and they were a team that was also looking at a defensive player. The Cowboys had considered him. Had he dropped a little bit, they would have considered trading up. As you got to look in the war room, and maybe Jimmy and Jerry had a deal going, as you see Jerry looking at the board. But both linebackers that the Cowboys had interest in, Reggie Brown and John Mobley, are gone, so they're likely now to trade out of the first round and still go for defense as you get a look at the war room. Let's now go to Chris Berman in New York.
Again, it's a full Chris day here on our NFL draft coverage. For the third time today, the Seattle Seahawks are on the board. I feel like we've talked about this pick longer than Steve Largent played there. But what they've done is move down twice and pick up a third-round pick from Detroit and a defensive tackle, Glenn Montgomery, from Houston. Their thought was Pete Kendall, the tackle/guard of Boston College, or Harrison, or Kennison. They moved down twice. Two of those other three are gone. I think now they finally step up to the plate and take Kendall. But we shall see. The Seahawks are on the clock. 10 minutes to go. It's pick 21. We shall return. We are back, and the Seattle Seahawks have under 8.5 minutes to go on the clock. Could be a big weekend for them. No press conference set yet, but as reported by our John Clayton, the club reputed to be about to be bought by computer magnate Paul Allen, a Pacific Northwester from down the road a piece in Oregon, for $200 million from Ken Behring, as it's apparent that the team will stay in the Pacific Northwest. A press conference could be held as early as this weekend. Doesn't sound like today, but as developments warrant this afternoon and this evening, we will keep you posted. Let's go up now as the Seahawks are on the clock to Chris Fowler and company up in Bristol. Chris?
All right, Chris. Well, Jimmy Johnson, never a history of shying away from controversial players in the draft. Mike Lombardi joins me. Of course, he spent some time in the war rooms over the years. Talk about that. You disagree with some of the guys saying this is not an atypical Jimmy Johnson pick.
No, I think if you look at Jimmy's history, he wants big players. He's got to play the run defense. This guy's a big guy who can clog the middle. Along with Tim Bowens, they can defend the middle of the field. I think this is a perfect pick for what Jimmy wants to do. He believes he can handle the motivation part.
In the Senior Bowl, did not make a lot of plays. Can you coach instinct? If a player doesn't have an instinct for making plays, doesn't matter how good a coach Jimmy Johnson is, can he get him to make plays?
Well, I think he can dominate the line of scrimmage, which I think Jimmy wants his defensive tackles to do. He'll get penetration. He'll be more of a one-gap player for them. He'll be able to get up the field. Sometimes in Baylor's defense, he had to play some two-gap schemes, and therefore it made him be cautious. But I think he can get up the field in Jimmy's scheme. I think what Jimmy sees is he's got Leon Lett, Chad Hennings, players like that playing for him now at Miami.
All right, now, Mike, Seattle on the clock. You like what they've done? They started out at 14th in this draft, moved down to 17 in one trade. Now here they are at 21.
Well, I think if what the information we have is correct, that they would have taken Brackens or Pete Kendall, then to be where they are and to collect the extra picks, I think they've done a wonderful job. They've added Glenn Montgomery to play inside defensive tackle to go along with Sam Adams and Cortez Kennedy. So they've really strengthened their team and still may, in fact, pick the player they wanted. So you got to take your hats off to Seattle. They may not get the draft pub that maybe Miami or Dallas gets, but they've done a fine job today.
They could get the offensive lineman that Erickson has liked all along, and Pete Kendall out of BC, or Brackens, a guy that we've all really liked, who continues to tumble down in the first round. Seattle on the clock, 6:10 to go. We'll continue from New York, from Connecticut, and from all over the place right after this.
Where is that note? A new attendance record set here at the draft. I think it was 4,406. Now, if all those people will just buy a season ticket to the Hartford Whalers, we in Connecticut could save our hockey team, and do it now. The new attendance record here at the draft. The pick is in for Seattle, and we've tried it 3 times.
We'll get Pete Kendall there sooner or later.
We'll see. Let's go up to the podium and see if the Seahawks have done Kendall or if they've gone another direction. Wait a minute. We could have a change in who's announcing the pick. Don't tell me it's already time for the commissioner to come visit us. Used to be Don Weiss, the voice of the late first and second round. Gene Washington, the former fine receiver from San Francisco, now in the league office. Looks like Gino is the man for a while.
With the 21st pick overall in the first round of the draft, the Seattle Seahawks have taken offensive tackle from Boston College, Pete Kendall.
Well, we tried it 3 times. And
Tampa Bay is on the clock.
Here's a guy that can step in and start right now, as we discussed. And again, to go back to their situation, you got Rick Meyer, who had a confidence problem last year, but you got Galloway, who's emerging. You got Warren, who's a Pro Bowl back. You block for Meyer. Maybe you get a receiver a little bit later, and Pete Kendall can come in and play one of 2 or 3 positions, Mel.
You're right, Dan. I think when you look at his ability, I mean, here he is at left tackle, and of course, a lot of people question because of the short arms whether he can handle that spot. But right there, he's going up against Cornell Brown, a good defensive end. You see him here, and you see some guys, just being dominated at the point. And you see the explosive qualities and the ability he has to get down the field. I thought he was the best run blocker in the draft. Now, he can play that guard position as he does here and get outside as a left tackle or right tackle. I mean, he gives you a lot of versatility. I think that's the asset of a Pete Kendall, in addition to the fact that when he was down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, there he is against Darryl Gardner, who already went earlier to Miami. So we see that ability of a Pete Kendall to contribute at guard or tackle. In fact, he is a great run blocker. And I think for Seattle, Mike Allman did a good job. We talk about when you buy in a draft is just as important as who you select. And at 14, maybe he felt like Pete Kendall was a little early, Chris. But at 21, he already got Montgomery, got a 3rd-round pick, and he still gets the guy he wanted.
Joe, let me go to the AFC West, which is that people may have forgotten everybody was 500 or better in that division.
Right.
And so in some ways you would think, well, gee, Seattle was one of those 8-8 clubs. It's hard for them to make headway on the Chiefs, who had the best record in football, which people forget at 13-3. But this is a division where you can move, and certainly on offense, they feel they can push it a little more this year.
They have to push it more on offense, Chris, and they have to get more production out of Rick Meyer. He's going to have to step it up a level. So what you do is you help him out on the offensive line. You go get yourself a young man who's going to be there for a long time. This is a young ball club. Joey Galloway last year. Rick Meyer, I think, is going to start to hit his stride and start to play a lot better football. Now Kendall comes in. You're starting to put together the pieces for Dennis Erickson. He's going to have to start feeling a lot better. It looks like this team's going to find a home in Seattle. They've got themselves a good, solid football player. Now Dennis Erickson can start to point this team in the direction he wants without all the distractions.
Next up on the clock, Tampa Bay with their 2nd first-round pick. I'm going to throw a name out. We're going to talk about his unique player in this draft. This is just adding it up. No inside information on this particular one. Mike Alstott, fullback, Purdue. Think it'd be a good fit for the Bucs. Maybe he's one of the names they're chewing on in their war room. We'll return after this. Malone, they drafted Keyshawn Johnson. He was there for, we were here for all the noise and the excitement. Mark was at Weeby Bank Home. The Jets now are getting set for their 2nd-round pick coming up. Let's go around to all of our sites, starting with Mark.
Well, Boomer, Keyshawn Johnson has made his way up from Manhattan here to Long Island at the Jets facility. He's meeting with Jets personnel with wide receiver coach Richard Mann, who, by the way, has a birthday today. President Steve Gutman brought him by and said, hey, listen, here's your birthday present, Richard Mann. We hope to talk to Keyshawn a little bit later. Meanwhile, the Jets huddle in their war room, looking at their 2nd-round pick, probably a corner or a defensive lineman. Now let's send it to Gary Danielson.
Interesting story of gamesmanship here from the Cardinals offices. They had the 3rd pick. They were going to take Simeon Rice, but they wrote down the name of Lawrence Phillips in New York, hoping that Baltimore with that 4th pick would try to trade up. Baltimore didn't bite. We did. We announced it, but nothing happened. They got their man. Let's now go to Sal Palantonio.
I'm in Ravens headquarters in Baltimore, but just up the road on 95 in Philadelphia, Eagles head coach Ray Rhodes has to be thinking, now what? In the last 7 picks, 4 players he wanted, Eddie Kennison, Marvin Harrison, John Mobley, and Reggie Brown, are all off the board. The Eagles could go in any direction, including trade down and get out of the round. Now let's go to Hank Goldberg.
In St. Louis, where the Rams in the 2nd round may be looking at quarterback. Tony Banks is their #1 guy at that position right now. Also, just a little note on what Seattle has done. I'm looking at ex-University of Miami coaches, and I'm waiting for Jimmy to make all those moves. Did Dennis out Jimmy? He got a 3rd-round pick. He got another extra pick. He got an extra player in Montgomery, the defensive tackle, and he got the player he wanted in Kendall. Let's go to Andrea Kramer in Tampa.
Well, Tampa Bay is on the clock right now, and they have made their pick. It's going to be defensive tackle Marcus Jones. They've already added Reagan Upshaw to the 27th ranked defense. Now they add another player. Obviously, he was too highly rated on their board for them to turn down and turn to offense. I think we can certainly look for offense in the 2nd round, but right now for Tampa Bay, it's Marcus Jones. Let's go to Chris Mortensen.
When Jimmy Johnson made his first draft pick here with the Miami Dolphins, he chose Daryl Gardner, and he made a statement not only about Gardner, but his own ability to motivate players. That's what Daryl Gardner needs. Look for more in the second round, or possibly a trade out of the second round. If he trades, everybody's talking Cowboys. I don't think it's going to happen. But let's go to Chris Myers in Dallas.
And the Cowboys still holding the last pick in the first round, likely to trade out of that round. It has been a little bit slow so far for the defending Super Bowl champion Cowboys. In fact, Walt Julep, the head scout, who you see standing up right there, bet Larry Lacewell that Daryl Gardner would be picked after the first 15 selections. Walt Julep, the head scout, he won it, as of course he went to the Miami Dolphins. That's his job. That's what he does. Let's go back to Chris Berman now in New York.
All right, gang, thank you. And Andrew has told you, here's the young man.
Tampa Bay has selected Marcus Jones, defensive tackle, North Carolina.
Well, I just thought that Al Stott,
Detroit is now
not that surprised. I thought it made a nice move on offense to help block for Eric Rett, but certainly Marcus Jones, Mel, who is the all-time sack leader at North Carolina, and a fellow named Lawrence Taylor used to play there, so that's not just one of those stats that we just throw out. So now Tony Dungy has stayed with his character. 2 defensive linemen here in the first round for the Buccaneers.
Well, what he got with Tony Dungy, you got Reagan Upshaw, who's a speed rusher at 255 pounds. Now he gets more, despite the breaking Lawrence Taylor's record, you get a guy here that's more of a stay-at-home type defensive tackle. He doesn't have great closing speed, only runs in a 5-1-2 area. But you see the productivity, the 94 tackles, very effective in that middle area where he can control the center guard and also do a good job against the run and free up those linebackers to make some tackles. And I think in this particular defense, now that he has the outside force guy in Upshaw who can get off that corner, you need somebody who can control the middle, and that's what they are hoping Marcus Jones will be able to do.
Well, you know, you talk about controlling the middle, but what you really have to understand is you have to understand what Marcus Jones will do for Tony Dungy. Where does he fit into the system? When you look at Tony Dungy's defenses, the tackles must control the line of scrimmage. They must control the center and the 2 guards. Their job is to penetrate and disrupt the offensive formations and the offensive plays. If they happen to run into a guy carrying the football, they'll tackle him. But their job is to penetrate the offensive line. That's why he went and got these 2 kids.
Let's go up to Bristol and join Chris Fowler and Mike Gottfried and discuss Marcus Jones. Fellas?
All right, Chris, thanks. So a 6th defensive lineman is taken in the first round. You're always telling me whether you're a college recruiter or a pro guy, defensive lineman's so important. What specifically do you like about Marcus Jones? You've seen him play in college.
Well, that's why Tony Brackens won't last much longer either. But you look at Marcus Jones, he's an excellent athlete. He can play inside or outside, which he did at North Carolina. So let's take a look at him. He hurt his knee before the Syracuse game, the opening game for North Carolina last year, and it hampered him a little bit. But here you see an inside player now coming inside, collapse in the pocket, gets his hands up, deflects the ball. He's got good size, so he's going to make quarterbacks throw over him. Big frame, can get his hands up. Here you're going to see him pursuit-wise. Ball thrown outside. Now he's an inside player coming from the inside, making the tackle. Here versus Clemson in the option, blocked. Has good leverage, stays good and low, comes off the block and makes the tackle on the quarterback. And I think he's really a good fit for Tampa. And again, Jerry Angelo and Tony Dungy, I think, are really doing nice things down there.
Warren Sapp last year in the first round, defensive lineman, different coaching staff, but 2 defensive linemen in the first round, Reagan Upshaw and now Marcus Jones. Let's go to Chris Mortensen, Miami.
You'll see this right here.
Okay. Okay, hey, well, I am here with Jimmy Johnson. We were just going over the first couple hours of the draft. Jimmy, I saw you working the phones, but you end up with Daryl Gardner. Controversial pick. Some people think that this is a guy who will not produce in the NFL because he didn't produce in college.
Well, Chris, you know, I've never been afraid of controversy, and obviously this is a controversial pick. But, you know, we started scratching our head on him about 3 days ago when we found out that he might drop. But earlier we thought that he was going to be a higher pick. And when I found out, I talked to a few people, and they said, hey, you might have a chance at him. I said, well, I was thinking about a linebacker, but if Daryl Gardner's there, he can make an impact on the game. I think he's got the biggest upside of anybody in the draft. I think, you know, just watching the tapes on him, you know, our defensive line coach worked him out here last month, and we really feel like that he can be a disruptive force. I think he's talented enough to play a defensive end or tackle.
Yeah, I also saw you working the phones prior to that pick. Did you have anything going? Could you have made a trade there?
Well, yeah, we had a chance to trade down if we wanted to out of the pick, but once we made a decision to take Gardner, once he was there, I said, hey, you know, let's take a risk.
But take a guy that's 6'6.5", 320 pounds that can run 4.8. I think, you know, right here the rewards are going to be large if we can do what we think that we can do, and that's get this guy in shape and get him playing up to his capabilities.
Your owner, Wayne Huizinga, has been invisible most of the day, but I noticed you were speaking with him after the pick. Can you tell me what your discussion was like?
Yeah, I was just kind of talking a little bit about the pick, and you know, Wayne and I talked yesterday. We talked about what we might do. I talked again this morning prior to the pick, and then and so he was aware. In fact, I talked about Daryl Gardner yesterday on the phone to Wayne, and I said, hey, there's a chance we may take him, and again, there may be some criticism. Some people say, hey, you know, maybe he wasn't the right pick. And I'm sure there are safer picks, you know, but I think the upside on this guy, he can be a dominating football player in the National Football League.
Is it a little different working with Wayne than Jerry?
Wayne has been fantastic. I mean, he has been great with me. He's a great owner to work for, and obviously we had a lot of success in Dallas, so that was pretty good too. But I expect to have success here with the Dolphins.
All right. Well, Dallas here watching. You have anything to say to Jerry? You want to make a trade right now?
Good luck. You know, take whoever you want.
All right. With Jimmy Johnson, let's go to Andrea Kramer in Tampa.
All right, Mort, thank you very much. Along with Bucs general manager Rich McKay, have you been persuaded by your new head coach, Tony Dungy, to take 2 defensive players in the first round? The former defensive coordinator has had his way, it seems.
Yes, he has. We said going in that defensive line was our #1 need. So getting Marcus really fit that bill. For now, we've locked Tony out of the room, though, and we will try to get to the other side of the ball eventually.
You lost 2 defensive tackles, Santana Dodson and Mark Wheeler, in free agency. Do you see Marcus being able to step right in, playing the nose next to Warren Sapp?
Absolutely. You know, Marcus was very successful moving inside this year at North Carolina. We felt like with Reagan Upshaw, we would upgrade the pass rush, and with Marcus, we would hold the point of attack at nose tackle.
Any thoughts of trading down some other players there that you might have moved down for?
Actually, in trading down at this pick, there wasn't a lot of activity. There was a lot of activity at 12, but there didn't appear to be a lot of activity at 22, so we stayed and very happy.
You've gotten the defensive line need out of the way. What needs can we look to for the second round? You've got the 5th and 11th pick in the second.
Well, we've said offensive line, and we've said secondary. Those are the needs. I'm not sure at what's on the board now. I think there's some awfully valuable players that seem to be falling, so you'll have to wait and see. But the 2 need areas, you know, would be offensive line and would be secondary.
All right, thanks very much. Let Tony back in the room. It's okay. Thanks, Rich. Let's head back to Chris Berman in New York.
All right, Andrea, Rich, thank you very much. So the Buccaneers, as we've mentioned, 2 picks early in the second round as well. And so the defensive linemen, they've come fast and furious here in the first 22 picks, 6 of them to be exact, starting with Simeon Rice of Illinois, and then Cedric Jones, and then the 2 Californians, Reagan Upshaw, Dwayne Clemens, Daryl Gardner, Marcus Jones. I think Tony Bracken's got to go in the first round as well. So you could have 7 on the D-line. Detroit, Buffalo, Philadelphia. That's where we're headed when we return to New York in a moment. The 6th overall selection, the first round pick of the St. Louis Rams, Lawrence Phillips. And first of all, Lawrence, congratulations to you. I know you probably wanted to go 1st or 2nd overall, but is this a happier day than a sad day for you? You have to be happy with the way it turned out, or are you a little disgruntled this afternoon?
No, I'm definitely happy to be playing for the Rams. That's basically where I wanted to be at, and I was thinking that they were going to trade up in order to get me, but they couldn't finance a trade with any of the other teams that had an earlier pick, so they just waited for me, and I slid down to them, and I mean, it worked out for both of us, I guess.
Well, it sounds like, Lawrence, you've been talking to the Rams for a while. Have they stipulated, and it may be early yet, any specific conditions as a prerequisite for drafting and say, hey, you got to do this, this, and this, and then we'll draft you? Have you gotten into that? I mean, are there several conditions there?
No, they haven't done any stipulations or anything. We haven't even really discussed it, anything as far as that's concerned. So I guess they'll be waiting until we do our negotiating as far as the contract and everything before they decide to make stipulations.
Lawrence, I guess all of this is a revelation and an education for you, and I know you're going to face the press really for the first time in a while tomorrow at your press conference in St. Louis. Can you give us a preview of what sort of things you're going to say? What sort of things are on your mind as you weigh out what this last month or so has meant to you, hearing all the things, and you know what you might tell the folks at the press conference tomorrow in St. Louis?
I'm just going to basically just answer questions, let them know that I'm happy to be selected by the St. Louis Rams, and I can't wait to get there. And basically just I want the season to start. I just want to kind of show everybody that I have a great character. I'll be fine in St. Louis on and off the field. I mean, I think a lot of those teams were a little bit afraid of the incident that happened earlier in the year, and I mean, they had a lot of reason to be fearful of picking me, but I think I can. I want to prove that I'm a great person and that they kind of might have missed a good thing.
Well, you certainly remain in familiar territory in Big 8 country, if you will, by going to play in St. Louis. Earlier, Lawrence, our Chris Myers reported that your relatives are unhappy with really the public relations treatment that you've received around the draft, and that you were considering changing agents and maybe have already interviewed a potential new agent or two. Is that true?
No, actually, what it was they were a little disappointed until they got the complete situation explained to them about what the strategy was with the media, and I think now after having that explained to them that they're fine with it. They were here today with my agent and everybody. We watched the draft together, and they were fine with everything. And no, I'm not considering changing agent at this point.
So you haven't even talked to anybody about representing you in the last month? That hadn't happened?
No, she was talking to some people that she wasn't, and just seeing what they thought about how we were pursuing the media strategy and all that. She just wanted to see what they thought about it, and that's basically what she was doing. And she was telling me about what they thought, and that's basically it. It wasn't really an interview as far as trying to hire anybody or anything like that.
Hey, Lawrence, let's talk some football. Who was your favorite running back? Did you watch any? Did you really say, boy, I really like to play like him one day in the pros?
There's so many of them. I mean, right now you got Emmett, you got Marshall Faulk, you got Barry Sanders. I mean, those are all great backs. You got Chris Warren up in Seattle, who's a very underrated player. And I mean, you just got so many great running backs to look up to and try to pattern yourself after. And I want to be like them all. I wish I could have all their talent and just play like all of them.
Did you, how old were you when you thought that, boy, maybe I could be a running back in the National Football League? When did you have this dream?
When I was about 19, after my sophomore year at Nebraska. I figured that I could probably play in the NFL after that.
What, have you talked with Coach Osborne since it's apparent that you're going to the Rams?
No, I haven't talked to him. I called the office today, but I forgot it's Saturday and the office is closed. And I got the recording from one of the secretaries. I think they were probably at spring practice anyway, or a scrimmage or something. So I probably won't get a chance to talk to him probably till Monday or sometime like that.
Are you how about that? Somebody's office is closed on the weekend. Who could think of that? Are you hoping? How do you think you'll be treated by the media right away? And obviously, what will you do to just say, hey, this is all in the past. I'm a football player in the pros now. Just watch. How will you try and sway what some people might be thinking at this point?
That's exactly what I established that. I'm trying to put all that behind me, and I'm looking forward. And if they want to dwell in the past, then that's on them. But I have to look forward, and the only way I can get better is by moving forward. I can't dwell in the past. That's not going to help me. So I'll just try to express that to them that I want to move forward, and I hope they will too.
You wish the season started tomorrow, Lawrence?
Hey,
you wish it started?
The season started tomorrow. I'm ready to play now.
We can't wait to see you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Have a good trip to St. Louis. Welcome to the National Football League, and good luck to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right, Lawrence Phillips, certainly one of the most watched players, maybe the most watched player from this draft this coming year. And certainly the fans in St. Louis are going to love him on the...
Carbon monoxide isn't the only thing to worry about coming from your tailpipe, because with every stroke of your engine, motor oil is being vaporized into exhaust, leaving less and less protection. That's why there's Castrol GTX 10W30. Of every leading 10W30, Castrol provides the most protection against volatility burn-off. So use Castrol, or watch more of your protection go up in smoke. Castrol GTX, the most protection against volatility burn-off.
The Porsche 911 Carrera was crash-tested in this secluded building. To Gerhard Royce, who tunes the radical suspension. To Ivanka Madsen, who stitches a cabriolet top that takes 14 hours to make. And to Stepan Rebrovich, who builds the more powerful engine by hand. This building was the perfect place for these crash tests. Why? Because it meant they didn't have to watch.
You're waiting for your blind date. You're scanning the room. You've got minty fresh breath and you're oozing charm. Then it hits you.
Larry?
Don't let bitter beer make a bad first impression. Drink Keystone, America's least bitter beer, so there's never a bad taste, never a bitter face.
Take this. It's always brought me luck.
Stop making faces. Drink Keystone.
Everyone's picking him to win the West in '96. But Piazza, Karros, and Mondesi know they'll have to put up numbers all year long if they want to play in October. The Dodgers battle the Marlins at 8, the Sunday game of the week. Tomorrow on ESPN.
Well, if it's draft day, draft Saturday, it's a return of one of ESPN's favorite bands, the Draft Dodgers. They're not getting picked in the first round, but they're playing it right outside the theater in Madison Square Garden and entertain the fans going in and out. And that was a nice visit with Lawrence Phillips, and we wish him the best. Detroit has made their selection. It's Jeff Hardings, a pure guard from Penn State. The first Penn State offensive lineman taken in the first round since 1982, when both Mike Munchak, a perennial Pro Bowler, and Sean Farrell were taking. And it's funny that one of the Bird Dogs, as a matter of fact, the man that drafted Sean Farrell for Tampa Bay back then in 1982, Kenny Herrock said, who's now with Atlanta running their draft, said that Hardings reminded him very much of Sean Farrell, who was a pretty good pro for 10 years. Let's go to Gary Danielson. Your thoughts on Hardings to Detroit?
Statement you made is what the Detroit Lions liked about Jeff Hardings. It's a 10-year player for him. He's going to fit right in. He's got great activity on the offensive line. And when you look at the highlights of Jeff Hardings playing in the Big Ten, you see a guy that moves well, 288 pounds, but a guy, obviously, he's going to be able to pass block. But what the Lions liked about him, being able to fit that guard position, they've lost a lot of players, but now with Hardings, a guy they had targeted for this second pick, they feel they got a guy who can short set, with a lot of three-step drops in the Lions offense, and a good run blocker who does not spend a lot of time on the ground. I think this is a perfect fit for the Detroit Lions. They've maneuvered very well, and they got a guy who they think they can both run block for Barry Sanders, give him some more yards, and pass block for the #1 offense in the league. A real good, aggressive draft for the Lions so far, a fit with Jeff Hardings, a guy who can take that position and play for 10 years. Let's go back to Chris Berman. Chris?
All right, Gary, thank you. Mel, Joe, the pick by Detroit, you like it?
I like it. I think offensive line certainly an area of need. There wasn't any question in my mind. I mean, you pick up Ray Roberts from Seattle, you lose Lomas Brown. So you've got some linemen moving, but still it's an area where you've got to protect Scott Mitchell. And I thought that one of the points that was just made is just absolutely perfect. That offense is a short step, get rid of the football, quick offense. Therefore, you've got to be able to be strong at the line of scrimmage. That's what Hardings looks like he can do.
Who's best available now that we get to the solid playoff teams in the draft?
Well, I think when you look now, you see a lot of defensive ends. Tony Bracken, certainly. A guy like Leland McElroy, an outstanding running back at Texas A&M with that great speed and that home run hitting ability. Ray Lewis, the productive middle linebacker in a year where there are just not many inside backers. Jabbar, who's creative. And, of course, Lawyer Malloy and then Andre Johnson. Andre Johnson, the pure tackle. Hardings, the pure guard, was just selected. And Jason Dunn, he could be there for Philadelphia or Baltimore at the end of the first round. Ingram, if he's just a little bigger and a little faster, would have gone a little higher in the draft. Allstott, the pure fullback, maybe for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the end of the first round. Moulds is a guy I think is the best after the catch of any wide receiver in this draft. Ray Mickens is short, but great leaping ability, tremendous one-on-one cover man. And Brady Smith, he was the one who outdid Dwayne Clemens as the leader in the nation for tackles for loss. Darkins is my underrated player. People say he's a straight liner, but I think he has some wiggle. Jason Odom, I was with at the Hula Bowl, very steady, very consistent player. Dawkins, great special teamer, can play corner or safety. Toomer, of course, brings the sides. I think he's going to be a hot property when we get near the end of the first round. And Jerome Woods, the pure safety, a late first, early second rounder as well. Matt Stevens is my special player, and I listed him as the 40th player overall because going into the year, he was projected to be one of the top 15 to 20 players in the draft. A cornerback at Appalachian State, but he tore up his knee at the end of October, had major surgery. He's now working his way back to 100%. Ran a 4.48 and a 4.51 last week during a workout. He may be ready to go by September. He's going to be a great second or third round pick.
Well, the Buffalo Bills are now on the clock, and they have a little over 4 minutes in which to make their pick. And usually the Bills they've drafted so low in the first round because they went to 4 straight Super Bowls until coming off a season ago when they picked Reuben Brown in the middle of the draft. They've always had a handle on a player that they think that a lot of people have rated about 38 or 40, but they have rated it about 26, 27, 28 where they're drafting. For example, Buffalo, following their Super Bowl years, as we take a look at how they've done, there's a special skill to drafting late. You see any mistakes are made high in the draft in the first round. Last year, because they had the offseason, they picked 14. They got Ruben Brown, who they think is going to be excellent. But at 27, they get Jeff Burris, who starts now at DB till he got hurt last year. Thomas Smith, who starts at corner, they drafted 29th. John Fina, who in 92, they drafted 27th. And in 91, after they went to the Super Bowl for the first time, the second to last pick went to Henry Jones, who's been to a Pro Bowl. So to hit this many this late is a special skill. Here's what Buffalo is trying to decide right now. They did not, when they made their board up a week or two ago, expect that electric Leland McElroy would fall this far. Now, they've just signed Thurman Thomas to a new long contract, and they have Derek Holmes, a great find last year in the 7th round. So this isn't an area of need for a team that had Bruce Smith played in Pittsburgh. They feel they might have had a chance to go to the Super Bowl. Andre Reed is not back. He could be back. We'll talk about that later. I'd like to see him back at Buffalo. Billy Brooks doesn't look like they can sign him, so they get Quinn early. They need a receiver, so it's McElroy or Eric Moulds from Mississippi State. That's the dilemma, and I actually can't tell you. No, not that I'm not allowed to. They're debating this right now. Let's quickly, while I debate it, let's go to Sal in Baltimore. Sal?
Chris, up the road in Philadelphia right now, they're entertaining offers to get out of the 26th pick. Like we said before, they lost the opportunity to get Mobley, Reggie Brown, Marvin Harrison, Eddie Kennison. They need a tight end, and John Gruden, the offensive coordinator, does like Jason Dunn out of Eastern Kentucky, but I'm not sure they take him with that pick. They may want to trade down and go for Marco Battaglia later in the 2nd round. That's a possibility. Johnny McWilliams, a tight end out of USC, is not even on their board, is not really in consideration at this point. So the Eagles are scrambling to see what they can do. Now back to Chris Berman in New York.
All right, Sal, under 2 minutes ago, another thing to consider, and Buffalo has had so many great years under Coach Bruce DeHaven at the special teams of outstanding special teams play, but their returns were not what it had been. And both McElroy and Moulds are outstanding return men. Certainly McElroy, Mel, with the speed, and Moulds as a kickoff return, just knowing how to move. Well, the pick is in. You're asking me to guess, huh? I actually
take a guess. Go ahead, Boone.
I think McElroy is higher rated, but I think they got to look for a receiver.
Moulds.
Buffalo Bills with the 24th pick in the 1st round select Eric Moulds,
there you go,
wide receiver from Mississippi State. Philadelphia is on the clock.
Well, Eric Moulds, the way the Bills have him scouted, he's got good size. He adjusts to the ball. The only knock on him, and I'm going to ask Sterling Sharp about it, in Mississippi State, he certainly saw no offense similar to the style that he's going to see with the Buffalo Bills. But again, he averaged 31 yards on kickoff returns. That's a need. And a size, possession receiver. They got Quinn early on one side. Sterling talked about Eric Moulds. Do you think this will hamper him playing in not an advanced type offense in college?
Chris, I really think we'll get an opportunity now to see how good this guy really can be, because he didn't get a lot of opportunities at Mississippi State. As a return man, yes, he's excellent, but look at the body size, the weight at 204. He's going to be able to play in the slot where Andre Reed made a name for himself and go inside and make catches like this and make people miss. This is the best yards after the catch guy in the entire draft. Coach Godfrey also agrees with me. This guy is for real. I mean, he's a ball-hawking type, loves to catch the ball in his hands, and he likes to make the special catch. He's the kind of guy that goes after the type footballs that a lot of guys in the NFL will give up on. Great one-handed grab right here, concentration on the ball. He feels like he can make every play a larger one, and that's the thing you want in a system like Buffalo. Quick hitting if they decide to go K-gun with no huddle. This is the guy you want inside, because right now I don't think he's going to be a big-time player at wide receiver for him right now, but I think they're going to get a lot from him as far as a return man, and they're going to work him in outside before they move him in. They're going to work him outside before they move him inside. So let's go to Chris Myers.
All right, Sterling, one of the scouts here in Dallas told me why Eric Moulds has great talent. He's a me guy, and he's a player they wouldn't draft. Also, Dave Wanstead told a scout Wanstead had Moulds at the Senior Bowl and said he wouldn't take the guy if he was in the 7th round. Couple of reasons. Once, prior to a game during practice, Moulds ordered pizza and had it delivered to him on the field. He also dropped 9 balls and had an attitude about the person who was throwing the ball. And when Wanstead addressed some of the players at the Senior Bowl afterwards, gathered them all in a group, he noticed that Moulds wandered off by himself over at the locker and was kind of just undressing, considered a me guy and a player that certain teams like the Bears would not have drafted. Let's go now to Mark Malone, who's with the New York Jets.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Just got some information that the St. Louis Rams, who have been trying to deal Jerome Bettis, have a deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just confirmed that. They've made the deal. It's contingent on a lot of things that might happen still in this draft in the 1st and 2nd round, but Bettis will become a Pittsburgh Steeler. Now the Pittsburgh Steelers can probably concentrate at this point on some other areas of need, either a linebacker or an offensive line as they pick 29th. Now let's go back to Chris Berman in New York.
All right, Mark, thank you. So varying opinions on Eric Moulds. Let's go. Let me ask you, Joe. Moulds, do you think this is a good mold for the Buffalo Bills?
No, I think the term mold will be very important because that's what he's going to have happen when he goes to Buffalo. He's going to have to be molded. He probably couldn't go to a better organization or a better football team to work on his discipline, and discipline is the word. I've heard terms like he's a distraction in practice. I've heard terms where nobody would touch him. Here's a young man who has an opportunity to prove himself. When he gets around a lot of those veterans, Jim Kelly and company, with the Buffalo Bills, he is going to learn how to be a professional. That's something this young man's going to have to learn first. Then his ability will be able to take over. But the most important thing with Eric Moulds right now is to mold him into a professional football player with the proper attitude. He was a kid who wouldn't show up for treatment, so there are some concerns about him.
Well, you pointed out, though, a veteran team with a chance to go somewhere, they won't put up for much of that in the huddle. Let's go to Craig James about Moulds. Your comments, Craig.
Well, first of all, he's an outstanding athlete who I think is just a tad behind Keyshawn Johnson. And everybody keeps talking about him having baggage. How many college athletes going to professional sports now don't have baggage with them? He's a me guy. Well, Keyshawn Johnson's a me guy. He wants the football. Everybody has an ego leaving college. It's no more a humbling world. Everybody here that's been in the backstage with me, they all expect to go to the NFL next year and to be starters. It used to be, hey, I just look forward to getting to know the guys. I want to sing in training camp. I can't wait to be a part of the NFL. Now guys have egos the size of monsters, and they expect to do things. So baggage is just something that organizations and head coaches, they've got to get used to, guys.
Yeah, a lot of Samsonites and American touristers, I guess, these days, Craig, is what you're trying to say around the league. Let's go up to Bristol and go to Chris Fowler and company and Mike Lombardi. What do you guys think of the pick, Chris?
Well, certainly guys do bring a lot more than the 2 carry-on bags allowed. And you've heard, Mike, some scouts say that they wouldn't draft Moulds in the 7th round. That's a harsh indictment. Your appraisal of that, and also the level of competition he played in the SEC.
Well, I think Eric Moulds is a multi-talented player. He's played in a great level of competition. I mean, Antonio Langham, who's drafted in the 1st round, he's played against Ron Davis from Tennessee last year, drafted in the 2nd round by the Falcons. He's played against Ray Mickens, who will get drafted in this draft. He's played against Deron Jenkins. He's played against a lot of draftable players, and he's dominated. He's made a lot of plays. I think this is really a good pick in terms of getting a very talented player that fits the scheme that they want to run.
On the other hand, you can get a good receiver from a small college. You don't necessarily have to play from great competition. 9 teams last year had their leading wide receiver come from a non-Division 1A program. Now, how do you see about Philadelphia right here at 25? Are they disappointed with how things have broken?
Well, I think, you know, they've lost Bill Romanowski. They lost Kurt Gavea. They want to try to get a linebacker. They could use a receiver. I'm not sure there's a receiver on the board they would pick. So I think Philly's probably entertaining, moving back a little bit to get another player. I'm sure they have a clump of players they like in this area that they would pick.
Any predictions on who they might take if they didn't make a trade down?
That would be difficult. That would be difficult. I think the trade down is the best scenario for them.
Okay, we'll see what happens inside of 9 minutes to go, and that 25th pick in the 1st round, the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll continue our live NFL draft coverage after this.
Pittsburgh, Dallas, a half dozen picks left in round number 1. Philadelphia, tight end questions. Let's go out to St. Louis and ask Hank Goldberg what's working now, Hank.
Well, I inquired about the status of Troy Drayton, who's been on the block for the last few days, I guess. And what they're saying now is at this stage, there's just not enough out there for them to give up Drayton. He's worth more than what they think they can get for him or what's left on the board. And when they didn't get the tight end they wanted earlier, that's not a direction they would want to go. That's as of now, but they are still talking to people about Drayton. And I did talk with them about the deal with Pittsburgh, and apparently that for Jerome Bettis, and that would be a late second round pick in exchange for him. And we should have an announcement on that fairly shortly. But Drayton right now is going to stay for a Ram, as a Ram for the time being, Chris.
All right, Hank, another tight end who was up for grabs, no pun intended, and I don't think Philly's going to do this deal, but Johnny Mitchell for the Jets is certainly up for grabs, and he's a receiving type tight end that Philadelphia is running at the West Coast offense. You need a tight end who can catch.
You really, you absolutely do. And the nice thing about Jason Dunn as an example is a guy who has a lot of versatility and a lot of athletic ability. Look at these teams that feature the West Coast offense: Denver, San Francisco, Green Bay, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. Look at the receptions out of that tight end position. That's the percentage of the catches. To the far right is the percentage of the catches that are made by their tight ends. You'll see that the tight end becomes a very important part of what they do on the offense. In a particular area, the red zone, that is someplace where Philadelphia would really like to be able to feature Jason Dunn. I personally think this would be an absolute excellent fit for John Gruden in that offense.
All right, the pick is in, Joe. This is your. I had the last one. I had to work for that, you know.
I know.
This is your shot. Here are the Eagles.
Pulled this one out of the hat. I'm not sure. Those Eagles
with the 25th pick overall in the first round, the Eagles select Jermaine Mayberry, tackle from Texas A&M Kingsville. Next on the clock, Baltimore.
He is, and I think Green Bay, 2 slots below, by the way, had their eye on Mayberry. He is, Mel, certainly not a name we were talking about there, but to me, one of the most interesting players in the draft from Texas A&M Kingsville. 321, but I know the Packers told me they thought he could even play guard at that size.
I'll tell you, when you look at Mayberry, he was a late riser. We had heard his name a lot in the last day or so as a possible late first rounder, Chris. And you watched him at Texas A&M Kingsville, the athletic ability for a big man, very quick on his feet, very athletic, and really move around, certainly slides very well in pass protection. Obviously, the level of competition is a factor. That's why he's still available in the end of the first round. But here's a guy who, like I say, when they really sized up the offensive tackles in terms of athletic ability for a 320-pounder, that's why he moved ahead of some of these other guys like a John Michaels at USC.
You know, it's interesting when somebody is this big and this dominant as far as where he played. A lot of the scouts I talked to and a lot of the personnel people said they felt like he just got bored playing against some of the competition, so therefore they never really saw that intensity game after game, play after play. He was so big and so dominant, Boomer, didn't have to be. But again, you have to look at the offensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles. Guy McIntyre, not exactly very young. Raleigh McKenzie. You know, Antone Davis has been a disappointment to them. So certainly it's an area where they could use some help, and they got it.
They said that watching the game films of Texas A&M Kingsville, that's way down in Texas, it's like watching the old grainy films, and it was kind of fun evaluating what kind of player that he really was. One bird dog told me he could be a pick from a small college like Larry Allen from Sonoma State has turned out for Dallas. If he's anywhere close to that, that's a great pick for Philadelphia. Let's go to Sal Palantonio in Baltimore. Sal?
Chris, it may be a great pick, but it's definitely a surprising pick because this team shored up the tackle position during free agency, getting Richard Cooper very early, spending $10 million on him, and then recently last week signing veteran Steve Wallace from San Francisco, a guy that Ray Rhodes knows. Wallace was going to play left tackle. In fact, Jeff Lurie told me on Thursday that Barrett Brooks was going to be moved into left guard. So exactly where Jermaine Mayberry fits in right now could be perhaps right guard. Maybe they think that Lester Holmes is not fully recovered from an injury, that knee injury from last year, but they're going to have to find a spot for him. It almost definitely means the end of Guy McIntyre's career in Philadelphia, Chris.
Well, we'll get back to you shortly, Sal, because Baltimore on the clock now with the next pick. That was the pick they made as Cleveland last year when Brady was gone, and they sent to San Francisco, and San Francisco picked J.J. Stokes. So this is originally San Francisco's pick, but it's Baltimore, Green Bay, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Dallas. What's left? So we will continue as we roll on toward the end of round one to the tunes of the Draft Dodgers. New York, the 60 has it died down a little bit. Don't worry, we're almost to the second round where the Jets and Giants are right up near the top of that as well. The Jets being number one. Baltimore, the Baltimore Ravens are now on the clock. And let's go up to Bristol, where Mike Lombardi, of course, has been with us and a great addition to our draft team this year. Mike, player personnel director of then the Cleveland Browns, was in the room when Cleveland ended up getting this pick when Kyle Brady wasn't available, and they traded it to San Francisco. And I'm sure Chris and Mike could spin a few stories about that afternoon in the war room, guys.
Yeah, Mike, this really is a pick with a history. Kyle Brady taken by the Jets just in front of you guys, and then I guess all heck broke loose in the room there.
Well, the TV started flying around the room, but I think what happened to us really was we decided we were either going to pick Kyle Brady or Mike Mamula. When that didn't happen, we made the best trade that we thought we could possibly make. We picked up a 3 and a 4 and next year's 1. So we felt going into the draft that was the right decision. However, when those guys weren't there, we were going to trade down.
Little did you know that day that you'd be sitting here today and the team would be off in a different city. What does Baltimore do now? They did not take the running back with the first pick. Many of us thought they might take Lawrence Phillips, ended up taking Jonathan Ogden. Now do they get a guy in this slot that Ogden can block for? Do they go for a McElroy?
Well, I think they have McElroy rated very highly on the board. He's obviously a multidimensional player, something that Ted likes. Ted likes a back that's more of a loose play back who can make some yards on his own, and McElroy certainly would fit into that situation. They've also got the tight end Dunn on the board that I think is obviously a good player. So I think Baltimore's in a very good position here, that they've got some needs and they've got some talent on the board that they would like.
All right, they've already got the big offensive lineman, perhaps now another offensive weapon to work with. Let's go to Sal down in Baltimore. Sal?
Chris, as Mike Lombardi said, Jason Dunn is definitely on their board. They're looking at tight ends, but they're also looking at linebackers. Ted Marchibroda has made it clear to me a number of occasions over the week he doesn't want to come out of this draft without 2 linebackers somewhere along in the draft, and you've got Randall Gottfried and Ray Lewis both there. They're possibilities. So look either tight end or linebacker, and don't discount McElroy as a possible pick. Now let's go back to Chris Berman in New York.
All right, Sal, thank you. Well, Baltimore has 7 minutes left to go on the clock. One thing Ted Marchibroda, as head coach and as offensive coordinator, has had is running backs. A fellow named Larry Brown, who was darn good at Washington, obviously. Lydell Mitchell and Joe Washington in Indianapolis. Then when he went and was assistant, well, that was in Baltimore, I should say, with the Colts. I'm sorry, that was a slip. I didn't mean to make it. Please, Colts fans, don't get on me. Billy Sims, when he was assistant with Detroit, hard to get much better than that. As his career wound on, Wilbert Montgomery and Ernest Jackson in Philadelphia. Certainly Thurman Thomas, all the Super Bowl years when Teddy coordinated that offense for Mark Levy. And Marshall Faulk as a head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Here is electric Leland McElroy. Here is a guy that can scoot through holes. Here's a guy that can make things happen. Here's a guy that Ted Marchibroda has to admire his skills. Is this the fit, finally, for Leland with the 26th overall pick? When we come back, we'll know.
I deserve a ride on a plane.
Roy.
With the 25th selection in the first round, the Baltimore Ravens have selected Ray Lewis, linebacker, University of Miami. Next on the clock, Green Bay.
Well, what Sal said is true in the linebacker department for what was the Cleveland Browns. I mean, they have Methuselah, the linebacker, there in most of those positions. So we understand. We also feel for Leland there. Although you got to understand, a late first, early second year, an important pick to the football team. I'm not really trying to just stoke him up here. I'm just trying to say that not everybody can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and he'll have a chance on the field. But what we were talking about with the Ravens linebackers, I mean, Pepper has been there a long time. They had Banks there last year, remember, who's been there since they invented the National Football League. So there's no question that this is a position of need for Baltimore.
I mean, Sal put it, I think, as well as he could. Teddy was not going to come out of this draft without a linebacker. This is definitely an area of need. There's no question that this pick is going to help the Baltimore Ravens. And Leland McElroy, the thing that he has to not worry about is he is going to go someplace where somebody expects him to play football. So I know it's taken a little while. I sat around for 4 rounds. I don't think he's going to be around that long. He'll wind up going needs.
Ted Marchibroda, after getting Ogden, which I'm sure surprised Ted, he had to come out of this draft with a running back saying, hey, you got to get me a linebacker.
Absolutely.
We're a 3-4 team. We want that Ted Marchip wrote it, after getting Ogden, which I'm sure surprised Ted, he had to come out of this draft with a running back or a linebacker and a linebacking core with Marvin Lewis. I know Marvin was probably in there saying, hey, you got to get me a linebacker.
Absolutely.
We're a 3-4 team. We want that kind of flexibility. All they have coming back is Craig Powell off a knee injury. They have Pepper Johnson, who is reported to be overweight right now. On the other side, they need somebody, and they also need somebody on the inside. Ray Lewis gives them the ability to play inside or outside in a 3-4 defense. I'm surprised Miami didn't go that route. And also, for Leland's sake, you mentioned it, Joe, Ricky Waters was a 2. Thurman Thomas sat here very disappointed, was a second-round pick. Rodney Hampton went right about this spot. So there's nothing to be discouraged about. Some great running backs did not go in the early portion of round 1.
Now, you and I haven't had a disagreement in almost 2 hours, but I'm about to disagree with you again. I don't necessarily think that Marvin Lewis is going to wind up in a 3-4 defense with the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think they can afford to. They've got too many down linemen to waste only just 3 on the field. I think he will convert and come up with some type of a way to incorporate a 4-3 style defense with all those people that they have in Baltimore. I can't see it being an exclusive 3-4 like we saw in Pittsburgh.
Let's get up to Chris Fowler and Mike Gottfried and get them into the discussion on both Ray Lewis in Baltimore and also Leland McElroy. What's going on and where could he go? Chris?
Well, Chris, first of all, Ray Lewis, really a compelling human story. For every other guy we've seen drafted today, it really is a joyous day. It's the culmination of a lot of hard work. It really is the fulfillment of a dream. And it is for Ray Lewis, but he really has been robbed of the opportunity to enjoy that. Today at 1 o'clock Eastern Time in North Miami, Ray attended the funeral of one of his former roommates, his close friend Marlon Barnes, the linebacker at the University of Miami, who was just savagely butchered along with his girlfriend on the Miami campus. Ray wearing Marlon Barnes' number 56 Miami jersey to the funeral there. So on a day which should be a cause for celebration, a day when he wanted to have his family there and party, instead he is grieving for the savage murder of a very close friend. You have to feel for Ray Lewis. But at least now, as his former roommate would have wanted him, he can look forward towards his pro career. He knows where he's going to be playing. Mike Gottfried, he's a guy we watched play in college a lot, and Miami certainly did not have a great season this past year, but no matter how far they got behind, Ray Lewis never stopped trying, a true warrior on the football field.
Well, he's a 4-3 middle linebacker, and Baltimore obviously wants to build up the middle, and they've got some good people on defense now. He helps them. But what's happened to him the last year at Miami is not as good at defensive tackle play, so people got to him as a middle linebacker a little bit more. You look at a middle linebacker, you want somebody who can diagnose a play and then go make plays. Ray Lewis did that. He ran to the football, made tackles. As a linebacker, you need to be able to cover zone coverage. You need to be able to man up. Here he's in zone coverage. He breaks on the ball very nicely, gets the interception, and then a good return. He's got excellent speed. Now, also on the middle linebacker, you want somebody who can go down the line, make plays, and also pursue the football. Here he makes a move, pursues the football out on a pretty good back right there, and a good tackling ability by Ray Lewis. So Ray Lewis is a very good linebacker who knows how to diagnose plays.
Not prototype size, but I think a lot of us agree that's just sometimes overrated. This guy's a football player. He's a guy who made his teammates play better in the huddle.
Truly has a nose for the football. He's got football instincts.
So he is headed to Baltimore again, a day tempered with the grief from his former friend Marlon Barnes, who was murdered. But at least Ray Lewis knows where he's going to the NFL, and he can play if he needs any more inspiration for his lost friend. Now back to New York and Chris.
All right, Chris and Mike, well put. As the Green Bay Packers have about 9.5 minutes to go, a player that they're thinking about is offensive line help, and maybe it's Jason Lehman, although that's an interesting pick. I know they wanted Mayberry. Here's the pick.
The Green Bay Packers have selected John Michaels, tackle from USC. Kansas City is on the clock.
Well, here's where the Packers were going. The Green Bay Packers, they're going to get another year or two out of Kenny Rutgers at left tackle. He's been a fine player for him for years. In John Michaels, they get a player who played behind Tony Baselli, the #2 overall pick last year at USC, until this past season. In 1 year, Michaels showed some outstanding athletic skills, and I think, Mel, you will agree with me. He's a John Fina type as far as an athlete is concerned. And the Packers feel that on offensive line, they can move him right in. He can learn from Rutgers. They're not worried about him starting right away unless they have injury problems. But he's a guy that they certainly need offensive linemen there. And Sterling Sharp, you got to protect the quarterback if you're going to move the ball through the air. You like the pick for the Packers, Sterling?
Chris, I really do. It's a good pick for him because they don't know whether Kenny Ruckers is going to play another year or not. Not only that, all of their stars, Robert Brooks, Brett Favre, Edgar Bennett, are very, very young. Hopefully they get their guard back and Aaron Taylor healthy this year and move Aaron Timmerman over to the right side. They got a relatively young offensive line with Frank Winters, their center, anchoring that line. I think they're in a very good position. This was a great pick for them because they're on their way up. And, I mean, going to the championship game last year, the only thing next for them is the Super Bowl. So a great pick for them. Chris, back to you.
I think late word, Sterling, last night that the Packers got an indication from Rutgers, and that was in question this week, but they got an indication that yes, he will play one more year. So I think that went into this pick as well. He's a good guy to school. Michaels, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Dallas coming up.
Snapshot.
Thurman Thomas a short while ago. A sleeper pick. Well, there's Thurman. He's realizing that sooner or later someone has to take a back of his quality. He just had been hoping that it would be in the first round. The phone has finally rung in Stillwater, Oklahoma for running back Thurman Thomas of Oklahoma State. It's the first selection made by the Buffalo Bills.
Thomas slid to the second round of the draft because of questions about his knee. But in his 8 seasons in Buffalo, he's been named to 5 Pro Bowls. And last year, for the 7th straight season, Thurman Thomas ran for over 1,000 yards.
So we remember that moment so clearly from '88. I'm not sure who that young man was hosting the draft at that point, but we are sure that this is a young man that's disappointed right now in Leland McElroy, but Thurman Thomas went mid-second, and he has never looked back. Kansas City has made their pick. Let's go up to the podium now and see what the team with the best record in football last year at 13-3 is going to do.
With the 28th selection in the draft,
it's a fumble.
The Kansas City Chiefs have selected Jerome Woods, defensive back from Memphis. Pittsburgh is on the clock.
Jerome Woods, a safety type, Mel, for Kansas City, which they really did not have a glaring need except kicker, and they've signed about 8 of them, including one of our favorites, Bjorn Nitmo. But you like this pick in Woods?
Yeah, I thought they might go Lawyer Malloy, so I was thinking safety as well. And, of course, you look at Jerome Woods. He has the good size. He's an outstanding tackler. I thought he was one of the best open field tacklers available in the draft from the defensive secondary. See how he creeps up? See, and this is playing the option. He gets off the block and makes the tackle. His ability to locate the football and make the play and the tackle, and also in coverage, moves pretty well. Pretty good closing speed. So you're looking at a pure safety. And, of course, Marty Schottenheimer, even going back to his days in Cleveland with Eric Turner, he's utilized the safety heavily, and you see the Woods here coming through with another big play in coverage. And I think the productivity of Woods was outstanding at Memphis. For a team that didn't get a lot of national recognition, he was a standout performer. And, of course, Lawyer Malloy from Washington, the other top defensive back from the safety position.
Well, the other thing you have to look at is that's one of the areas on the Kansas City football team where they are a little bit long into tooth. When you look at the depth chart, you got Dale Carter, you look at their interceptions, Brian Washington, William White, James Hasty, Darren Anderson, and John Taylor. Mark Collins is retired. Hasty and Washington are both 31 years old. Carter is 26. When I talked to the Kansas City Chiefs, the one thing that they said, they're very happy with their 22. What they're looking for is depth. And again, I don't think you can't really have enough cover safeties, people who can run and get the ball, as well as corners. Carl Peterson continues to just find ways to put people on his roster that will be able to keep this football team solid in case somebody gets hurt. Does a great job of being prepared for the future.
The Pittsburgh Steelers are another team that's done a good job of building their ball club. Obviously, they feel they could have won the Super Bowl. It's Pittsburgh and Dallas now at 29-30. Now, again, as you heard us report, Mark Malone and others, Hank Goldberg, the Bettis trade to Pittsburgh is not yet finalized, but that'll obviously sway whether they would go for a Mike Alstott of Purdue or not. If they're going to get Bettis, that wouldn't be what they would do. Would they go McElroy, although they already have Pegram? Now, we're going to go back and discuss the Chiefs pick with Andrea, or we're going to wait on this? All right, we're going to stay right here. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they've lost their quarterback. They may have lost, depending on how the court situation goes with Bam Morris. They may have lost him, a big back that they have relied on. Yep. Of course, they lost their offensive coordinator, Ron Earhart. They've lost some things. They're a very solidly built football team if they get Bettis. Now where do you look if you're the Steelers, Joe?
Well, I don't necessarily think if you get Bettis. I think Jim Miller, they feel like can play. If that's not a problem, you have Cordell Stewart. If that's a problem, you've got Mike Tomczak to go in and fill for a little bit. They're okay at the quarterback position. Obviously, when you lose a starter who takes you to the Super Bowl, there is a loss there, but I think they're okay. At running back, I really feel like that Bam Morris may not be able to play this season. If that's the case, he didn't come on, just played real well at the end of the year. They've acquired Will Wolford. They've acquired Daphne. John Vaughn, we talked about that earlier. Boomer, you just don't know. They waived John L. I personally think here you go after a fullback. It fits into what the Pittsburgh Steelers want to do. Alzot, to me, would be an excellent choice because he not only can block for you, which is a big part of it, but he can hammer and make holes. That way Pegram doesn't have to take the beating. And I really feel like Chan Gailey's probably going to go back to maybe a little bit less wide open offense and give Cordell a chance to play a little bit more quarterback. So there's a lot of ways for him to go. I think it'll be running back, though, whichever direction they decide or whoever they want to take.
Well, Joe, here's the way we're going to go. Let's go to a man very close to the Steelers situation, our Mark Malone, who's at Jets headquarters. Mark, your thoughts. Would it be Alstott if Bettis isn't there? Do you do it anyway? What would you do?
Well, I know this, Chris, that they would have taken either Leland McElroy or Mike Alstott if he was on the board. But I'm telling you, the deal that they've got right now to get Bettis, I think, takes them out of that plan. So you have to wonder if they're scratching their head. Could have had two very good young players at running back. Now, another guy that the Steelers like was Brackett, the linebacker. They need to get some linebacker depth. So do you go with Brackett right now, or do you go to an offensive lineman? Another place they need depth, of course, they lost Leon Searcy, a kid I know they like a lot. It's a kid by the name of Jermaine Stevens out of North Carolina A&T. This kid is 6'5 and a half, 337. A lot of people believe this guy could be the next Eric Williams, like the Pro Bowler out of Dallas. Chris, back to you.
All right, Mark, we won't have to wait long to see what the Steelers are going to do. Let's go up to the podium in Gene, Washington. Steelers. And now we have the commissioner back. Again, you get the Super Bowl teams, you get the commissioner back.
With the 29th pick in the first round, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Jermaine Stevens, tackle, North Carolina A&T.
Now there's a direct hit for Mark Malone.
Dallas is now on the clock.
You have a Jermaine and a Jermaine, who are both small college tackles, but big guys. I mean, how can you be 325 pounds? How can they possibly have training tables at these small colleges to get them up to 325, 330 pounds? But offensive line, hammering type of football, it adds up. And now the Dallas Cowboys are on the board with the final pick of the first round. Terrible towels and the Cowboys. We'll be back.
Sometimes life is an uphill battle. Handle it. Dunlop Tires.
Sports is big business. You already know that. But see how major athletes team with big corporations to market themselves into global enterprises on an all-new Outside the Lines. Sports Inc. Monday at 7:30 p.m. Only on ESPN.
Oh, your stomach is about in your throat, you know, and your heartbeat is about bazillion pumps per second.
People talk about butterflies, but it's like in a knot before the game. Somehow you got to calm yourself down. You know that the ball is coming.
The fans in the stands are just going crazy, pointing fingers, saying you're going to fall.
You got to be real physical. You got to be intense. Because if you aren't, you're not going to survive.
The linebackers, they all looking at you and the eyes are big.
I can't outrun the other guys on that field, but somehow I find a way to do it.
You can't be thinking about anything else except just putting the ball through the uprights.
I like to be in the tough situations when everything is on the line.
It's like going through 15 car wrecks in one day.
It all comes down to power. It really does.
It takes over your whole body.
It's the best feeling ever.
I can feel it.
I can feel it pumping through my veins.
I can feel it coming at me. I can feel it pulling on me.
I can feel the power. Come play with us for about a week and see what you think about it. Just see what you think about it.
Sweet dream, baby. Sweet
from Double Cheese.
Sweet dreams.
As we return to the NFL draft here in New York, the Dallas Cowboys have about 11 minutes to make a pick and wrap up a first round that's, well, it's a little bit quicker than last year, which was about, what, 5:38. Going to just get in on that. Jermaine Stevens, Mel, at 3:37. Wow.
And a cut 337 really looks like a basketball player. Chris, you watch him here. This is in the Senior Bowl, and this is a guy who was a former prep defensive tackle. Didn't play offensive tackle until 1993. And you can see, even technically, he has it. He's a guy that really brings an attitude to a football team. Very explosive football player. Tended to relax a little bit at North Carolina A&T. Here he's going up against Howard University. So the competition factor he's going to have to adjust to, knowing that every time that ball snapped, he's going to be at peak efficiency, and he's going to have to really concentrate. But in terms of physical ability, he's got it all. He compares favorably to an Eric Williams. The only difference, Eric Williams was a 3. Jermaine Stevens, the Steelers are gambling one at the end of the first round.
Let's go up to Chris Fowler and company for their thoughts on the Steelers going with a large man from a rather smaller school. Chris?
Yeah, a very large man, and now a guy for Stevens to block for in Jerome Bettis, getting him from the Rams. Mike Lombardi, that's now a done deal. What are the details?
Well, what happens is the Rams have traded Jerome Bettis to the Steelers, and the Steelers have acquired the Rams' second-round pick. The Rams have also have the Steelers' second-round pick, so they flopped in the second, and the Steelers are going to have to give up a 3 or 4 next year in the draft. So the Steelers have Jerome Bettis. He's talked to by Bill Cowher, and he's a member of their organization.
And a difference of 17 slots in that second-round pick now. Is that good value plus the conditional pick next year for a guy who was a former Rookie of the Year?
Well, I think what you have to look at is how many teams are actually interested in Jerome and how many could fit him into their cap comfortably. And what's happened in the event of the cap is it's hard to trade players because they don't necessarily always fit. So based on the value of this trade, I think Pittsburgh's got themselves a hard runner who can gain 1,000 yards for them, and he can make plays for them. So, and the Rams got rid of a cap number for them, which is helpful for them too.
Super Bowl champs on the clock. Meanwhile, we've talked about Dallas. You think they may be in a little bit of a difficult situation with some guys they liked already gone. Let's kick it down to the Las Colinas area where Chris Myers is standing by. Chris, what do you know?
Chris, we're at Valley Ranch. They did like the linebackers, Mobley, Brown. Those players are gone. They're giving some discussion to Tony Brackens, the defensive lineman out of Texas. However, the Cowboys have targeted another defensive player. They are discussing possibly trading out of that pick. As you get a look live at the War Room, Jerry Jones discussing that. By trading out of the first round into the second, they still might be able to get their player and save $200,000 or $300,000 against the cap. Another issue, something to look for down the line, on June 24th, Michael Irvin will be in court for the indictment on possession charges of cocaine and marijuana. Now, he's not expected to miss any practice time or training camp, but earlier I talked to Barry Switzer about possibly Michael Irvin's situation affecting the Cowboys drafting a wide receiver.
Going into the draft, Chris, it was not a consideration. We didn't even, that was never even discussed, but a lot of people have asked the question, and Jerry and I discussed it at lunch, and Larry Laceville, about what if a great receiver all of a sudden fell. We would be very sensitive about it, but, obviously you got to do what's best for the football team, and Michael, I think, would understand that. Deion would understand that. I don't think that scenario would happen, but we would be very sensitive to that, but it wouldn't be because we have a concern about Michael Irvin.
And you get a look at Barry Switzer live in the Dallas Cowboy War Room as, again, they are thinking defense right now. One of the reasons they're not so worried about wide receiver is because Deion Sanders, remember, is a full-time football player for the team this year, and Jerry Jones told me that you'll see a lot more of Deion Sanders on offense at wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. We'll let you know as soon as they make their selection or trade out of that opening round. Let's go to Chris Berman now in New York.
All right, Chris, thank you. Under 7.5 minutes to go on the Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys. And then the Jets are up, and the crowd gets back into the ball game very, very quickly. They're certainly close to home for him, but they have that type of backing up Emmitt Smith, and he's a youngster they did last year. Let's go down to Miami. Chris Mortensen, where do you think Dallas is headed, Mort?
Well, Chris, they were going to have representatives with 4 different linebackers today. Remember, they like to do those draft day deals with the team on the clock and kind of get a guy to sign a deal before the pick is up. Well, yesterday, Commissioner Paul Tagliabue sent a memo to all clubs saying, as you can see here, a member club has inquired whether it would be permissible for a club to have its representatives physically present with one or more potential draftees during draft day. The answer is that it would not, at least until after the player has actually been selected by the club and his selection has been publicly announced at draft headquarters. Next, permitting club attendance in a player's home or elsewhere in his presence would invite several negative consequences. First, it would facilitate actual violations of the prohibitions on negotiation, give and take financial discussions, or making contract offers to players before they are selected. You see the little memo there. Second, it would cause widespread and corrosive suspicion that such violations are occurring, even if they are not. Third, it would effectively coerce other clubs to follow suit rather than risk being placed at a perceived competitive disadvantage. If they did so, truly chaotic situations would inevitably result. No legitimate purpose that could be served by being in the company of draft-eligible players justifies such negative consequences. You are therefore advised that if any club's representative is proven to have been physically present with a draft-eligible player or his representative, family member, or friend prior to the player's actual selection in the draft, the club will be subject to serious disciplinary action by this office for conduct detrimental to the league. Now, clearly, that was pointed at the Dallas Cowboys, and it goes back not just to contract people, and you can see the Cowboys here, not just back to contract signings, but the Cowboys used to have representatives with 10, 11, 12 players, and what this would do was if another team was calling a player to say, we think we're going to take you, that would give Dallas a chance to jump up ahead of that team and take that actual player. So there were some competitive advantages with the draft as it pertains to having a representative present. That's a no-no in this draft. Let's go back to Chris in New York.
And Mort reading some serious, as we call in the business, Chiron. He's bucking for that host position, I can tell. Let's go to Craig James. Craig, where do you think the Cowboys are headed here as they have about 2.5 minutes left on their pick?
Well, a couple of points here listening to everybody talk about this situation. Michael Irvin is a competitor. He will come back. That's going to be his only release, getting away from all the distractions that he's created for himself. Deion Sanders last week told me he's working extremely hard on being a wide receiver. He's at it every day. He's at Valley Ranch trying to become a better wide receiver. Point taken there is that Sterling Sharp says he can't be both ways as a starter. True. They are not sure that Kevin Williams is their guy, then he can do it week in and week out. As for defense, linebacker is a very sore issue with the Dallas Cowboys. They have tried to shore that up with some acquisitions here in the offseason, but I know in talking to a lot of the teammates last year, the middle linebacker spot was a weakness on their ball club. To verify it and even prove it, I went and talked to other teams and opponents of the Cowboys. They said the Cowboys are soft in the middle. You can run the ball and knock their linebackers out of there. So I think the Cowboys have to be very sensitive to that situation right now. That's why I think Tony Bracken's a defensive lineman. I like Bracken's a lot, and I would consider him, Chris.
All right, Craig, we'll see what the Cowboys are going to do. Chris Myers, we go back down to Big D, and you would suggest that if guys weren't there that they would move out. We've had 6 first-round trades thus far. If Dallas makes it, it'll be 7. There have been some trades, and Dallas always comes to mind. What are they going to do, Chris?
Chris, it looks like they are trading out of the first round. Again, economical reasons, because they're not looking for starters. They're looking for backup players and still targeting defense. They are talking with the Washington Redskins. As you got to look at the war room, that's Stephen Jones, the money man and capologist for Jerry Jones, on the phone. Right now, the deal is Washington will send the Cowboys their 2nd and 3rd round picks. So that's pick number 37 and 67. Washington would go into the Cowboys spot, and the Redskins are hoping to take Ernie Conwell. That is the deal that is being proposed. And we should get an official confirmation of that shortly. Let's go back now to Chris Berman in New York.
Well, we'll see, Chris, if that's the case. Boy, to get into the getting a pair of 2s. Well, no, 67 would be a third. A 2 and a 3 down that low. What do you got? I mean, that make it from Dallas's point of view, that might make some sense.
Dallas's point of view, from the Redskins' point of view, it would make no sense to me to give up those draft choices to take Ernie Conwell, who you can get where that selection is. And Ernie Conwell, on a lot of teams' boards, I'm probably higher on Conwell than a lot of teams are, and they're not even close to being this. I had one team tell me last night he could be a 4th or a 5th round pick based on their assessment. He's only measured out at 6'7" at the combine. So to take a tight end, it's under 6'1" in the first and trade up to get him, I think would be a very questionable move.
Well, I think it's interesting that the Cowboys and Redskins are even talking a trade situation. Let's go to the podium, Joe, and find out what's happening.
With the last pick in the first round, the Dallas Cowboys have concluded a trade with the Washington Redskins. The Redskins obtain this pick number 30. Dallas obtains Washington's 2nd round pick in this draft, number 37, 37th pick in the draft, and Washington's 3rd round pick, which is number 67 in this draft. With the pick that they just acquired, the Redskins select Andre Johnson, tackle, Penn State.
And let's explain
the New York Jets are on the clock.
Roar that you've just heard. These are the Jet fans who want the Jets are next on the clock with the first pick in the second round to go to Leland McElroy. And you know what? Why not? I mean, I know they got Morrell a little back, but they were fired up when McElroy is available. Is this his spot? And Andre Johnson, now that's a lot different than the Conwell pick, right? I mean, this is a guy projected as a first rounder.
Mel's feeling a lot better about this one, I got to be honest with you.
Definitely. I think this is a pick that makes a little more sense. You look at Andre Johnson, the guy at Penn State was that pure tackle, whereas Hardings, the one earlier, was a pure guard. I thought he had an outstanding senior year. Big kid who's got pretty good movement. If you remember, as a junior, he shut out Simeon Rice. No sacks, no hurries in that game. And you watch him here in pass protection. He gets his arms extended, and he really does a good job. Good base, a good, strong base. I like the kid. I think that to go and give up this much means that there was no way the Washington Redskins felt like he was going to drop into this position. To give up a second and a third for Andre Johnson is steep, but he's a heck of a lot better football player than I think a player, say, like if they would have taken a Conwell, we talked about that, would have made no sense. So at least they're getting a guy who was projected to be a first-round draft choice.
Now, I don't think it's steep for one simple reason. You have to question Jim Lachey's ability to be able to come back. I personally think that this is an insurance pick. If Lachey comes back, great. If not, they've covered themselves a bit.
Well, we understand the Jets pick is in, and it got in about as fast as Leland McElroy hits the hole. So let's see if this is the spot. And they couldn't wait. They need offensive help. It's at the podium, and the Jet fans are waiting. The crowd's back in the game.
With the first pick in the second round, the New York Jets select Alex Van Dyke, wide receiver, Nevada, Reno. Arizona is now on the clock.
Oh, here's the reasoning behind that one. And you feel for that young man. Here's the reasoning. Leland McElroy is a similar back to Adrian Morrell. Very similar. Alex Van Dyke, before Jet fans, they can't believe that, you know, like last year when they took Brady on top of Mitchell, who's another tight end. Alex Van Dyke, led the nation in receiving at Nevada up in Reno. He's a return man, Mel, yes? Well, they got their return man. He's a productive, he's not that fast, but they got their home run hitter in Keyshawn Johnson. They got Jeff Graham. Well, and the fans are not pleased with the pick. But I like Alex Van Dyke as a player. I just thought it's a little high.
I think when you look at Alex Van Dyke, Chris, and I watched him at the Hula Bowl, and I think he's going to be a good receiver. May not be a great receiver, even though he led the nation as a junior in receiving, put up a lot of big yards and big totals at Nevada in that conference where defense really isn't the name of the game. You watch him; he really understands the position. Really a tough kid. Does a lot shows a lot of ability on inside routes. Great hands, I tell you. And he's a strong kid, real strong frame. I thought he was impressive at the Hula Bowl practices. I know when you watch him, even in the Las Vegas Bowl, he had an ankle injury. He played through it, so tremendous toughness. I like the kid. He doesn't have blazing speed, and he may not, like I say, be a go-to guy. Keyshawn's going to be that player. This kid can be solid in the NFL, kind of like a Vincent Brisby, Yancey Thigpen type player. I liked him. In the Hula Bowl, he made a couple big plays, but he dropped the pass here and there, which bothered me a little bit because great players do make great plays. But in the case of Alex Van Dyke, I do not have a problem with his selection. I think Bobby Engram was a little smaller, a little, not quite as quick. You look at this kid as a guy that I think fits in very well with Keyshawn Johnson.
Well, one thing they say that the Bird Dogs say that when it comes to running routes, that Van Dyke is outstanding. Let's go out to Jet headquarters and Mark Malone, because Mark, it certainly didn't take the Jets long to send this card up to the podium. So obviously this is a guy they've been looking at for 5 or 6 picks.
Oh, there's no doubt about that at all, Chris. Couple of things. Richie Kotite told me that he would take 2 wide receivers in this draft. Remember, Ron Earhart liked to spread that offense out in Pittsburgh and really throw the football here last year. Here's the other reason they didn't take Leland McElroy. Their running back, Adrian Morrell, who was a free agent, they signed him this afternoon to a 4-year deal worth about $6 million. So they've made a commitment to him. Now Van Dyke, Keyshawn Johnson, Adrian Morrell, they've got their offense locked up and pretty healthy right now. Also the offseason acquisitions. Now they're going to probably start looking at the defense from this point on in the draft. For now, let's send it on to Sterling Sharp, a guy that can catch the ball.
Thank you, Mark. I have been known to catch one or two back in my day. I like the Alex Van Dyke pick because now I see what's going on. I'm thinking Ron Earhart wants to run the football, but this has looked like the old Pittsburgh setup where you get all the wide receivers on the field. And if you take a look at the numbers, this guy's no stranger to big plays. He led the nation, as everyone said, in receiving and catches and yards. He's a home run hitter also. He's got very good speed, but he's good size. That means they're not going to let Neil O'Donnell hold the football. They're going to go back 3 steps and get rid of it. Go back 5 steps and get rid of it. They're going to make Neil O'Donnell's job very, very easy, and they're going to let these wide receivers do the work, Chris.
All right, Sterling, thanks. Joe, let's see who he fits in with.
Yeah.
Got a lot of guys in that.
Wait a second, though. Sterling says he's going to make Neil O'Donnell's job very easy. Sterling, when's the last time you played quarterback? It's not necessarily an easy job. It helps an awful lot, I got to be honest with you. But Neil O'Donnell now has some people to go to as well as protect him. You've got Graham and Keyshawn. Now all of a sudden you add Van Dyke. You've got 3 wide receivers that can get the ball up the field. And as I mentioned, for Keyshawn Johnson and Van Dyke, what's very important is they're going to be in an offense where if they're spread out like I anticipate them to be, after 5 yards, nobody's going to be able to lay a hand on them. So you're going to be able to see the natural pass-catching ability of these 2 young men right away without waiting for the production. So you're going to get value for what you wanted, wide receivers who produce. I think, again, it's the only way the Jets could go based upon the philosophy that they're starting to use.
I like Van Dyke a lot as a player. I know there's some teams who didn't have first-round picks that maybe were looking at him in the middle of the 2nd round. So Jet fans, don't get upset. Van Dyke is a good player, but you know what? Leland McElroy fans don't get upset either. Arizona's on the clock. Leland McElroy.
Leland's still on the phone. I don't know what that means.
Might be delayed television.
But he does slide out of the 1st round. Here's a junior who came out early along with Tony Brackens, a fellow guy down there at Texas who also slid out of the 1st round. In most mock drafts, including Mel Kiper's, both these guys listed in the top 13. Does it mean they made a mistake coming out early, going all the way to the 2nd round?
No, I don't think so. A lot of good players fall out of the 1st round. Now, the question on Leland McElroy is, can he go tackle to tackle? I think he can. He's a high-character player. And as far as Tony Brackens, defensive linemen are a premium. You want defensive linemen, he'll go here quick.
So many scouts love Leland McElroy, but there are questions about toughness. Did not play in the Aggies bowl game. Is it his time finally? Let's go back to New York. Chris?
All right, Chris, thank you. It's Arizona that's on the clock, and the pick is up. And hopefully for Leland McElroy's wait.
With the 2nd pick in the 2nd round, the Arizona Cardinals select Leland McElroy, running back, Texas A&M. Jacksonville is now on the clock.
All right, Leland, he went earlier than Thurman Thomas did in the middle of the 2nd round in 1988. We all know how well it turned out for Thermal. So Arizona has Simeon Rice, and they have Leland McElroy, and Mel, the way you look at it, they have a pair of 1st rounders for a 1 and a 2, huh?
I think there's no question. I think when you look at Leland McElroy, what he brings to the table in terms of home run hitting ability, he's going to be a kick returner as well. Maybe another year at Texas A&M, but they're getting him in the early 2nd round, and I think they're getting a heck of a football player. Workout-wise, what's a workout? Look at that ability to get off the ground, tremendous athletic prowess. Now you watch his quickness and his speed. I mean, he ran a 4.36 at the combine on a slow track, which is remarkable 40 speed, which means he's, if he gets into the daylight, he's going all the way. Look at the ability that this is really on the football field will be change of direction skills, quickness out of your cuts, just natural athletic prowess is what Leland McElroy brings to the table, and strength. People say he's small. He's a 200-pounder, was able to do 22 reps at the combine. So when you look at a guy that's able to do between 18 and 24 reps at 225 pounds, this is pretty impressive. This is his workout numbers, 4.32 to 4.38, and that range is his consistent 40. Great vertical, 20-yard shuttle, which goes that quickness and that change of direction ability. To me, when you look at Leland McElroy at this point in the draft, he's a heck of a choice. I mean, for a team like Arizona, Vince Tobin had Marshall Faulk to work with at Indianapolis. I'll tell you, it makes a lot of sense, Joe.
I really do, and I think, again, he went defense first, now he went offense. What this does is it sends out a very loud message to Garrison Hurst. Hey, look, we made you an offer. We wanted to give you an opportunity to prove yourself. You didn't want to come on board. We're moving on. Sorry about it. Goodbye. Garrison Hurst fumbled more than any running back in the league last year. It didn't help him. I think he should have taken whatever deal and got himself a good job out there. Now, people are going to wonder. Leland now has an opportunity to go in, help a football team a lot. Jim Fossil, their offensive coordinator, will get the ball out in a hurry. Boomer Esiason certainly knows how to get the ball, good soft touch into a running back's hands. We could be seeing the next Thurman Thomas in more ways than one, Boomer, coming out of this draft.
Well, as we try and boost Leland's spirits up a little bit, which he just did, the commissioner just met him and had a couple of private words there. Last year, there were 32 picks in the first round. This is the 32nd pick. So if it was last year, this would have been a first-round pick. His older brother, Reggie McElroy, played offensive line with Jets and Raiders, etc. So he knows what's coming a little bit more in the NFL than maybe some others who weren't in that situation. Let's go up to Bristol, right? Is that where we're going? Let's go up to Chris Fowler and company. And why, Chris and Coach Gottfried, do you think he fell here? But how big a player do you think he could be in the NFL?
Well, that seems to be the real question, and obviously there's a difference of opinion among scouts. I mean, here's a guy who is a true workout warrior, Mike. When he gets in the football field, some teams have questions about him. Break him down.
Well, the big question is, can he run tackle to tackle? That's the big question. Now, he's a high-character running back that, as we look at on film, he is really explosive. He has great speed.
He has the speed. We showed that in the workout. And then break down what he does between the tackles and evaluate that.
Well, what you want is a running back that's going to make people miss with breakaway speed. Here's Leland making people miss, stops, avoids tackles, and takes it the length of the distance for the touchdown. He has great vision, hand-eye coordination, and catching the football. A lot of toss sweeps by Texas A&M. Here's a nice pass. It's a low throw. Look at him go down, make that catch, turn it into a very big gain. He tested very well, as Mel talked about. He tested, he's explosive. Here's run the cone drill. People are very impressed with what he's done in the weight room and the testing room. And I think the other thing you got to remember about him, he's a dangerous kickoff return man. 36.6 career yards. He's the best in NCAA history. So he brings that to Arizona also. I think, Chris, if there's one other question about Leland McElroy, it's the fact that he's only played for 1 year. Really only did it for 1 year, and he was hurt in a couple ball games. So that's the questions around him.
But perhaps a steal for Arizona. He spent his college career last year trying to get to Sun Devil Stadium in the national championship game in the Fiesta Bowl. Didn't get there, but now he'll play at least the first year of his pro career, apparently, down in Arizona. That's where Gary Danielson's standing by. Gary?
Yeah, right, Chris. I'm with Vince Tobin. Vince, you had a plan. You said you may need a blocking fullback, a tight end, but I don't think you planned on Leland McElroy being there.
Well, we really didn't. When it came closer to our pick, it was you got really, really excited because we had Leland rated very high, and it was such a gap between him and anybody else that we might have picked in the thing. We just couldn't afford to pass him up.
In fact, as your choice came, we had some video in the warm room of you reacting to a couple choices. It looked like you were a little upset at the time, or was it just more possibilities?
Well, it was more possibilities, and I was afraid that we would lose him because he was rated so high, and we'd talked to some other teams about possibly moving down if he wasn't there, and then that kind of fell through, and I thought we were going to be stuck with the pick and not get him, and I just knew that the Jets were going to take him because I thought they needed a running back, and when they didn't, I guess that's the way I reacted.
And when you take a Leland McElroy, of course, that leads to the next question about Garrison Hurst. He's a restricted free agent. Talk about Garrison and how the plans fit with Leland and Garrison now.
Well, of course, Leland gives you a couple things. He's a great kickoff return guy, and he also can return punts, even though he didn't do it in college. Ray Mickens did it in college, but he can do it, and so he gives you an instant threat as a kickoff and punt returner, and we'll just see how it plays out. I don't think you can ever get too many good football players, and I would still hope that Garrison would be on our football team, be a very big productive part of it, but we just couldn't afford to pass up Leland.
All right, things have gone well so far for you in the draft. Thanks a lot, Coach.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's go back now to New York and Chris Berman.
All right, Gary and Coach, thank you very much. And Leland McElroy, relieved finally, is with our Craig James. Craig?
Relieved. I don't know. Is the word relief appropriate for you right now?
Yes, it is. I am relieved. It didn't matter what team I would play for now. It was just a matter of being selected. It really didn't matter to me where I would go.
Why do you think you waited until the second round to be selected?
That's a question I do not have the answer to. I was very disappointed, but at the same time, my career doesn't end now. It's just beginning. And, there's been a few second rounders in the past who, had a lot more ability and were able to be in the first round, like Ricky Waters, Thurman Thomas, and people like that. So, I mean, it's no big deal to me. I'll make up for it.
I think there are a lot of people that use the word ability and potential. Why are they using the word potential with you?
I think they use the word potential because I've only started at Texas A&M 1 year, but I've been playing since I've been there, which a lot of people don't realize. So, I think the word potential is used because of the simple fact that I only started and was a full-time starter 1 year.
when you're on the phone with the Cardinals? What'd they say?
He told me that he really didn't believe that I would slide this far, but it was just the opportunity they couldn't pass up.
You keep telling him you're #1 pick when you go back to that. Remind him.
I'll remind him of that, but the most I can do right now is just go out there and try to showcase my abilities and make up for today in some type of way.
All right, good luck, and thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you.
All right, good luck. All right, I know this. The Cardinals did get 2 #1 picks today, Boom.
Yeah, that's the way they're looking at it, Craig, that's for sure. So the next on the clock is Jacksonville, followed by the Giants. We shall return.
Now you don't have.
Newcomer of the year in the Southwest Conference, only carries 6% body fat. You look at him and you say, well, he's 260. He's undersized. Ran a 4.2 on a slow track. That's a great workout, in addition to the fact he was a player. Had he not had a disappointing Sugar Bowl performance against Virginia Tech, you may have been looking at a guy who was a mid-first rounder. So for value alone, I think Jacksonville did a tremendous job in this draft, really solidifying a defensive front seven with Hardy and Brackens, which was a major weak link on that football team last year.
You
Joe.
talk about major weak link, Mel. All you have to do is defensively take a look at where the Jacksonville Jaguars were ranked, and it'll show you why Tom Coughlin has decided to go in that direction. 21st in total yards per game, 24th in yards rushing, 28th in points. That means people scored a lot against him, takeaways, and absolutely dead last in sacks. That's why he's committed himself to going to get people who can make plays. Again, you have to use Tom Coughlin's verbiage here. I want to take players where I can get value at that position. He has gotten value again in Tony Brackens.
Well, so that's what Jacksonville has done with 2 picks in the front seven. Now we have the Giants, and their fans are waiting with under 6 minutes to go. Tom Coughlin comes from the Giants school, really, having worked for a long time under Bill Parcells. Value for the pick. Now, the Giants went defense in the first round, going with Cedric Jones, the big defensive end that can play all 3 downs from Oklahoma. Now, Mel, if you're looking at value for the Giants, is this a wide receiver spot? You could get good value, certainly, here.
You get great value, Chris. I think you look at a guy, certainly an Amani Toomer at Michigan. You can get a Muhsin Muhammad from Michigan State, a Derek Mays from Notre Dame, Bobby Ingram from Penn State. These are some good wide receivers that had they been first-round draft choices, Joe, nobody would have argued with that selection. So a Giant team that certainly, Thomas Lewis is still an unknown quantity despite being a first-round pick. They have Callaway back. All they have after that is Gary Harrell and Omar Douglas. So, if Dave Brown's going to be re-signed, they better go after a wide receiver with this pick.
Well, let me just interject something about the Giants here. Dave Brown, if you're listening, you haven't really proven a lot. Take the deal that's on the table because they're trying to put some people on the field to help you out. Just a little tip from a friend.
Well, the Giants have made the pick. Let's go up and find out what the Giant fans, will they hooting or will they be hollering?
They're on their feet.
They're ready. Is he going to protect Dave Brown, this fellow?
He's listening to it.
It's got to be a receiver, doesn't it?
I would think so. It looks like he's hoping.
With the 34th selection overall, the New York Giants have selected Amani Toomer, wide receiver from Michigan. Amani Toomer.
Well, and he has a good name for New York because he dresses well. Amani, but
if he doesn't,
he'll dress in Armani suits now that he's an early second-round pick with the Giants. And, of course, this is a good position to get good value. Sterling, let's go up to you and ask you about Amani Toomer from the Big Ten. Good pick for the Giants. You like a 6'3", 200 pounds. You can relate to a big receiver.
Very good pick. I think Amani Toomer is one of those guys that his production was down a little bit because of the emergence of Mercury Hayes on the other side of him. I think Amani Toomer is a great pick in this round right here because of the fact he's a big guy like everybody else in this draft, but he's got pretty good hands. I think he got a little bit discouraged because he didn't catch as many balls as he probably wanted to, but you can see the concentration and tight coverage. Great blocker. He loves to get in there and mix it up a la Michael Irvin, likes to dominate little defensive backs, but he has very deceptive speed because he's a galloper. But he's got great vision out of the break, gets his head around real well, and he's also a very nice return man. And I say nice that he's the kind of guy with a crack, he's going the distance. He's got great vision, uses his blockers, set up his blockers real well. And I think he's the kind of guy that can come into a New York area, coming from playing in front of 104,000 at Michigan. I think he can come into the New York area and help whomever Joe recruits to play quarterback. I think he'll come in and do a very good job for him. Chris, he's a very safe pick. I like this guy. I think he's going to have a great future in New York. Back to you.
All right, Sterling. One thing he also knows is the rules. His father is an official in the Pac-10. So there won't be any question about the rules for Amani Toomer dressing well in New York with Joe's quarterback. George Young, the fact that he took a Big Ten player high in the draft, not exactly news. Butch Woolfolk, Carl Banks, William Roberts, Mark Ingram, Eric Moore, all first-round picks in '79 from the Big Ten, as in addition to Brian Williams, Gerard Bunch, Thomas Lewis, Tyrone Wheatley. I mean, we might as well. I mean, now Toomer, of course, is second round. So see, this year George missed the Big Ten pick in the first round. He certainly didn't want to miss in the second round, and we'll be back. Coming up almost bang and bang. The Bucs have been very busy going with Reagan Upshaw, defensive end from California. Also going with Marcus Jones, defensive tackle from North Carolina. So Tony Dungy has addressed his defensive line. Now let's address Andrea Kramer down at the land of the big sombrero and find out where Tony turns from here. Andrea?
Well, Tony has got to turn to offense, and you can see them mulling around there. That's because they have made their decision. In fact, Tony Dungy is likely on the phone with the pick right now. It'll be fullback Mike Allstott from Purdue. Now, they took Tracy Johnson in the offseason, but they are going to a two-back attack. They definitely need a fullback out there. The other thing is you wonder if this is a little bit of a message to Eric Rett. He's making $336,000 this year. He's not been to one minicamp. He's threatening to hold out of the second minicamp. Maybe this is a reminder. Mike Allstott was the featured back in college, and he could even be the featured back here if you don't decide to come in here. So I think it's a great pick for Tampa. Even though they needed offensive linemen, this is a guy they clearly had. They clearly could not turn down, rated so highly on their board. Chris, back to you in New York.
All right, Andrea. Well, wide receivers, now that we've gone into the second round, has certainly become the place to go. The day began with Keyshawn Johnson to the Jets, and then Terry Glenn, Ohio State, Eddie Kennison and Marvin Harrison back-to-back. Eric Moulds going to Buffalo, Alex Van Dyke at the top of the second to the Jets, and then, of course, the Giants going with Amani Toomer. So 7 of the first 34 picks being wide receivers. But it all began with Keyshawn Johnson, much to the glee of the Jet fans here at draft headquarters at the theater at Madison Square Garden, and much to the glee of the New York Jets. Let's go to Mark Malone, who's with Keyshawn Johnson, all of a sudden a native New Yorker. Mark?
All right, thank you very much, Boomer. The pride of New York City, Keyshawn Johnson. There had been a lot of speculation, Keyshawn, as to whether or not a deal would get done between yourself and the Jets before the draft. Were you relieved?
It was you. No deal has been done. They drafted me. So, you know, I'm just here and I'm excited about it and I'm waiting.
Did you ever at any time up until the beginning of the draft when they went on the clock believe that this thing wouldn't get done, that they wouldn't draft you?
Well, I didn't know what they were going to do. I didn't know if they were going to draft me and trade me. As a matter of fact, somebody walked up to my agent and said, Jets are going to draft him, then they're going to trade him in 2 minutes. So I didn't know exactly what was going on.
You've had a chance now to meet with some of the Jet personnel, talk to Rich Kotite, Leon Hess, the owner. How do you feel? You feel this is something that's going to be able to get done? You're looking forward to getting here and getting started on work?
I think so. I think it's a job that definitely is a business in the NFL, and I have to, abide by the rules and do the things that I'm capable of doing.
Mm-hmm. There was a quote that circulated around, and I don't know if it's accurate or not. Somebody said that you had mentioned that pre-draft deals were for suckers. Do you feel like you're in a situation now where you not only have some leverage, but that you can get this thing done and get it done quickly?
I think that my agents, they'll get it done, whatever it is, and whenever it gets done, they'll get it done. And I think that both sides, the Jets and, my side, are willing to work together, and that's something they've been doing, dialoguing with each other and just getting it done. That way we won't have no problems when September comes.
Now, obviously, they plan on using you right away. Have you had a chance to talk with Richard Mann, Ron Earhart? Any notions yet as to how they're going to use you in this offense?
No, and I think I'm going to take a tape back to California with me, so I'll be able to study it and everything when I get back here on Thursday for minicamp. I'll be ready.
You're going to be here, contract or no contract, for minicamp?
Oh, I'll be in minicamp, yeah, for sure.
All right, Keyshawn, thank you for stopping by, and congratulations. It's a big day for this young man at USC. Chris, let's send it back to you in New York.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. In addition to him being the ex-USC ball boy, and when, as we said earlier, when the Ronnie Lotts and the Marcus Allens played at USC, and he also was a babysitter for one of our reporters, Shelley Smith, and her young daughter, Dylan. I suspect, though, in talking with Shelley today, who was here, that the rates have gone up a little bit for Keyshawn babysitting now. Although maybe she gets squatters' rights, gets the old rate, and Keyshawn puts all the bill on the Jets. We'll have to get to that story a little bit later. Sterling Sharp, a man that caught many a ball in the National Football League, spent time with a young man that hopes to catch many a ball, Keyshawn Johnson, on the field and in the film room.
USC wide receiver Keyshawn Johnson is one of the most electrifying players coming out in this year's draft. And what truly makes him special is his desire to excel and an uncanny ability to put the ball in the end zone every time he touches it. I think one of the big things in the NFL, Keyshawn, you got to learn is a lot of people play bump and run. And people didn't play you bump and run in college. Show me one thing if you were running an out route and a guy played you bump and run man-to-man. How would you, get into your route, get off the line of scrimmage versus that type coverage?
First of all, I would, if he was inside of me, I would threaten him inside, push up, not spend too much time playing with him, get to my break. There's the ball, because you don't want to spend too much time, quarterback timing and everything.
And the one thing I think that'll help that release that you just showed me is using more of your upper body strength. And the one thing you got to remember is once you get on top, if you fall, a defensive back won't catch you. But if you start to fight with him, he'll fight back. And I think one of the things, if I could use you right here as a defensive back, the setup move on the inside was wonderful, but use your upper body strength to get that shoulder. Knock him off, slide, knock him off balance. And now when you get up, you got that 2-yard area that you're working in where you lined up. You push up straight up the field. That keeps the timing and the space between you and the defensive back plant, and you get out. The timing between you and your quarterback is still there. Defensive back thinks he's got great coverage. You're wide open for a catch, possibly like you like to do it, take it the distance. We're talking about working that 2-yard area in your releases and being a big receiver like the greatest receiver ever, Jerry Rice here. Watch the violence in the 2-yard area that he works right here. That's what you're going to have to be able to do on Sundays.
In college, it was a little bit easier for me because I got the respect of defensive backs not being up on me in the bump and run. And having a situation like this, I was able to hit them, slap them once or twice. And when I had an adjustment route like this, I was trying to be as violent as possible and accelerate and get to the ball well. So hopefully, I'll be able to fill some shoes.
Another Pro Bowl receiver, Tim Brown here, and we talked about working that 2-yard area on your releases. Watch Tim run the out route and, kind of critique his performance here.
First of all, the thing that he didn't do is threaten him to the inside because Dale's giving him, giving it to him. All he has to do is threaten him to the inside a little bit, push back up at least a yard, push straight up the field, and right about here, sell him on the streak, break to the out. But right here, Dale, great closing speed, able to jump in front of the ball.
Almost comes up with the pick. And you'll be facing that week in and week out. And the one thing you have to exercise is patience and control. We talk about if you're patient enough to do those things and the body control, you can be very successful in this league.
That won't happen to me.
Well, we know he has ability. We know he has charm and charisma. Sterling, is Keyshawn coachable?
He's very coachable, Chris, and I think the one thing that he's really excited about is for someone to give him information that's going to make him a better player in the NFL. He was really pumping me for information, picking my brain about certain techniques, and the one thing he talked about is how do I get in a position to play low? Because being 6'4", he's going to have to use his ability to move around people and get in and out of routes and transition, and he's got to do it very, very quickly. And just like the receivers at Washington did for Joe, I think he will make Neil O'Donnell's job a lot easier, Chris.
Sterling, when it's hard for you to rank yourself and at Jerry Rice and an Irvin, et cetera, coming out of college, you're looking at it a different way. But now as you look back at yourself coming out of South Carolina versus Keyshawn coming out of USC, similarities, differences, or either yourself or those other big-name receivers, how do you look at it?
I think the similarities, Chris, is the fact that we were all considered big receivers, and the NFL was making that change over to big receivers. I think Keyshawn in this draft of receivers are on the tail end of that large wide receiver scale. I think now they're going to start to tail down and look a lot more like Bobby Ingram in the years to come. And the one thing that you're going to have to do to make that transition that I had to do, and Michael and we talked about, is play low. And when you're that big and people trying, going over the middle and playing with your back to the defense, you got to be able to read what you see, believe in what you see, and be able to listen to guys that may not have been to Pro Bowls. And that's the one thing that helped me the most was guys, when I came in, took care of me and allowed me to learn the offense on my terms, made it easier for me. And I think in New York, I think that's going to happen to Keyshawn. I think Jeff Graham is a great guy to learn from. He did a great job with Curtis Conway last year, and as eager as he is to learn, I think Keyshawn Johnson will be fine.
What will be a good year for Keyshawn this year? obviously touchdowns and key third down reception turning into first downs don't show up in as many of the stats, and that really will make a good year. But for sheer number of catches, what'll be a good year for Keyshawn this year, Sterling?
Well, Chris, I think, first of all, as long as he allows the catches to come to him and he don't go looking for them, he's going to be fine. I think he's going to catch in Ron Earhart's system. He won't catch any more probably than 70 or 75 balls. I look for, with the additions of Alex Van Dyke and with Jeff Graham, I think they're going to try and spread it around very, very well. They got two great tight ends. I think, 70 balls and 1,000 yards with at least 7 or 8 touchdowns is a great year in a Ron Earhart type system. And as long as Keyshawn can be patient, play under control, and don't go and ask Neil O'Donnell to throw him the football, but do everything in his power to get himself open when he's hot, I think he's going to be fine.
All right, Sterling. Well, from one who knows what it's like to come to the National Football League and then succeed, maybe Keyshawn will give you a call.
I hope so.
Some post-film work with you. Here's Keyshawn signing the autographs at Jets headquarters. He had the shortest commute from the draft to his team press conference. We'll be back.
Atlanta Falcons first-round choice, Deion Sanders, cornerback, Florida State.
I was kind of scared. I thought Detroit was going to take me. I would have asked for so much money that I had to put me on layaway.
Prime Time started his career as a Yankee in '89. That fall, he joined the NFL as a Falcon. Signed with the Braves in '91. He played in the series in '92. Traded to the Reds in '94. Won the Super Bowl with the Niners in the '94 season. In '95, he ended his baseball career as a Giant and won his second straight Super Bowl in January with the Cowboys. Well, that was prime time, and now let's here's the prime time in the second round. Let's get you caught up to date. We gave you Leland McElroy, of course, the second pick with Arizona in the second round. Tony Brackens, the cattleman, steer roper, defensive end from Texas, going to Jacksonville. Amani Toomer, the well-dressed wide receiver from Michigan, going to the Giants. Mike Alstott, who I thought would go in the low first round at Tampa Bay, so they wait around and still get a first round value in the second round. Fullback from Purdue. Lawyer Malloy, the hard-hitting safety from Washington, goes to New England. Kavika Pittman, defensive end, a pass rushing specialist from McNeese State, goes to the Dallas Cowboys. That's the slot they got in the trade with Washington. So they get down about a guy that, and get Pittman, a guy that not too many people know about, except that it's a pass rushing extraordinaire player, Chris Myers. Pittman can get the job done, and I think Dallas is maybe looking at that as a guy that comes in behind Charles Haley and learns a little bit about it. Chris?
Exactly, Chris. As you get a look at the war room and the Cowboys are clapping, they were excited. They liked Pittman equally to Tony Brackens and felt that they could go down and still get Pittman and maybe pick up an additional draft pick, which they have another second-round choice here coming up with the 60th selection. This was their 37th choice. In fact, he has drawn comparisons, has Kavika Pittman, a former NCAA Division I AA Player of the Year, to Charles Haley because of his relentless pursuit of the quarterback, and those defensive coaches that worked him out for the Cowboys said that he's a little bit down the way, but certainly a player that will help on the defensive line, weakened in terms of depth because of the loss of Russell Maryland. Shante Carver, a former #1 pick, will probably start on the end a lot. Charles Haley will get a breather or two down the rest of the season until the Cowboys make it to the postseason. Right now, Dallas is still thinking defense, as we will keep an eye on their second pick in this round. Well, now let's go to Chris Fowler back in the studio.
Chris, thank you. So Dallas making the trade, dropping down 7 spots and getting Kavika Pittman. Mike Lombardi, a veteran of many war rooms, joins me. Let me ask you, first of all, we see those Dallas guys pumping the fists in the air. Is that playing to the cameras? I mean, do you guys really do that if there aren't cameras in the war room?
Oh, it's an exciting day. I know that. I mean, you don't sleep the night before, and I think that when you get something that you really wanted to have happen, I think you get excited. It's almost like a game. The adrenaline's flowing, and you're really excited.
There's almost a formula for figuring out whether or not you get good value in a trade. Of course, you don't know what kind of a player Pittman's going to turn out to be yet, but dropping down 7 slots and getting him, is there good value in that just on the surface?
Well, I think what Dallas made a decision that they got a trade that they liked, that they're comfortable with, that had the quality that they were looking for, and they moved down and they could make a trade to go back. They would have liked. That's why they made the trade. You never make a trade to go back just to pick one player. You've got several players in mind.
Okay, 37 picks in. Who's done the best so far?
Well, I think Jacksonville obviously getting the 2 players at the top of getting the 2 players that they needed. The Rams are a good team to focus in on. They have 2 picks in this round. They've got 2 good players in the first round. They're the youngest team in the National Football League. They're really building along. They've got long-term contracts. So I think this is an important round for the Rams.
And the Rams are coming up. They pick 42nd. That's about 5 picks away. Houston has made their pick. We'll talk about that when we come back. Cincinnati now on the clock with 8 minutes to go for their second round pick as we continue our live NFL draft coverage on ESPN.